All right, let's do this webinar. This is not obviously the friendliest topic to cover, but it is a good topic. It's about self-improvement, and it's about how to deal with a lot of things that affect all attorneys. And then it shows what happens if you don't address those things. And this is a good thing for law students that don't know what you're necessarily getting into and how you need to protect yourself. And it's also good for existing attorneys and also senior attorneys, because it's not just people that commit suicide, it's people that give up on their legal careers or suffer in silence and don't know how to deal with things or obsessed with whatever it is, whether it's people not being nice to you or how difficult it is in a law firm or rejection or overwork and all these kind of things that affect lawyers. So this is an important topic and I'm glad to be covering it. I'm not sure that this is the type of topic where a lot of people may not be ready for it, and which is okay. But it definitely is going to, hopefully you'll get a lot out of it, and it will help you, and you'll improve because of it. One other thing I just wanted to bring up real briefly is this is a live webinar. After I'm done, I will answer questions. I typically clear a lot of time so I can answer as many as I want. And the questions don't have to be about this topic. They can be about really anything related to your career. I'm happy to answer these questions. I may also do a little bit of a presentation about what to do in the current economy, because I'll just say a few things about it, because this is not a good legal market for most practice areas. And it's not a good legal market in large cities and with large firms at the moment. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about that today as well. And then how you can conduct your job search in the right method as well. And when I say the right method, I just mean how you will do things in terms of finding jobs. And certainly it's not an attempt to sell you on BCG. It's just showing you what we do and how you should conduct your search. If anyone that's on this webinar would like, I can send a more detailed document about how to do that and what we do, because I think it would be helpful. Like it or not, your self-perception and the way you think about yourself in the world will basically create happiness, but also affect the type of life you live as well. Just a few things about me and how I came to that conclusion is different points in my life followed and then actually met and then ended up working with people like Tony Robbins and people that have written best-selling books about business and then other very successful people that wrote things and did the kind of stuff I'm doing, but generally. And I watched how they did it and how they thought about themselves. And I also watched and then I modeled that and with that sort of information, and because I had confidence in myself, and it has ended up obviously transforming my life. And I realized how important that is. Now, it's something that got me into a great college. And then it's something that helped me get into law school. Then it's something that ended up making me start this business, and in a large sense, because I was in law firms and I didn't know, I was not able to think positively about myself. So that is how, just because of the environment and how a lot of people become successful. I also read books like Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which is one I recommend. And there's just a lot of ways that you can think about yourself differently and put good thoughts in your mind. And if you do that while you're alive, what's going to happen is the quality of your life's going to improve while you're alive. How long you live as a person is going to improve. Your happiness and your family's happiness and those you're around will all benefit from you and from association with you. And this is important stuff. It's really some of the most important conclusions anybody can reach about their life. And your personal psychology and nothing will do more to determine how happy you are than the way you think about and process the world around you. Just real briefly, just to touch on someone like Tony Robbins. He was this overweight, unhappy, and there's nothing wrong with being overweight. I'm not judging him for that, but unsuccessful guy living in a 500 square foot apartment and our studio apartment in Venice, California, not really having a great life. And he really turned that around. He started reading, who was it? It was, anyway, I'll tell you the name. And if I don't tell you right now, I'll come back. But he started reading someone that was a kind of a self-improvement person at that time. And part of the self-improvement that he was exposed to that really changed everything was just saying over and over again to himself these incantations. I'm a valuable person. I'm responsible for everything that happens in my life. And literally just sitting around and chanting these. He also, I think he got kicked out of this 500 square foot apartment, and he decided to live in the basement of his friend's house with washer and dryers and everything, and took all this poster board and wrote up all these types of sayings on these poster boards and just put them around this entire basement, and just in big letters, this big poster boards. And that is really telling, because once he started doing that, everything changed. And even to this day, like he does, I was getting on a private plane with him years ago, and we were getting ready to go to something in Australia, and he was just sitting there just chanting things while he was walking on the tarmac, and like, I can help millions of people, I have all this sort of thing. So just think about that, how these successful people that are happy and stuff, how they do everything they can to consistently monitor and keep their self-esteem up, and how much that means. You can do it a lot of ways. You can do it by reading. You can do it by following people. You can do it by associating with powerful people, which is what most are successful and happy people. You can do it by surrounding yourself. Some people, they go to church every week, or others, they go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings when they've done other things, or they go to therapy, or they sometimes people will try to do drugs to get that, but that usually doesn't work. The self-esteem is extremely important. And so what happens to a lot of people inside of law firms is, because of the work you're doing and everything, people start judging themselves harshly, and their self-esteem suffers a lot. That's not good. And law firms, I'm sorry, but it can be very tough. You can thrive in that environment if you understand the demands and get into it and put yourself in the right environment, or you can't. I was in two separate law firms, one where almost everyone was happy, and the other where almost everyone was miserable. I quit the law because the one where everyone was happy had a policy that if you left to go to another firm, you can't go back. And then the one that was terrible was just the most awful place in the world. I can't even tell you how bad it was. It was bad for everybody. All the partners were leaving, all the associates were leaving, everyone that was there was unhappy. I mean, not everyone. Pretty much everyone. So it makes people judge yourself harshly. Now, you have an option, which I think is a good one. You have the ability and should to surround yourself with people, and that means law firms, and that means different types of people that are emotionally, just opening something here, people that are emotionally helping you, to surround you if you want, or not helping you, I'm sorry, to surround yourself with people that are generating feelings of inferiority, that are also likely to feel badly about themselves. When you're in a big New York law firm or a big LA firm, and there's very successful people there and people that are doing very well and competitive, that makes a lot of people feel very insecure, and they drop out of the law completely because they think, if it's like this everywhere, that's what I should do. Now, I just want to tell you a little bit about what I do at BCG to help people with this. If you are a candidate at BCG, and if you are in a practice area that you're stable in, and it's preferred with one practice area, then I'm interested in talking to you. But most attorneys aren't. Or if you're in a small market and do things, it's probably okay too. But what we do at BCG is it scares people off, but we believe in them, but often they don't believe in themselves. We send them lots of jobs. We send them lots of firms to approve. We do all this stuff and just keep fighting for them because we believe in them, and we know, and this is not a sales thing because it's something you can actually do yourself. We know that the more places you apply to and the more places you approach, the more likely you are to find an environment that works for you, because every law firm is different. Every law firm you may like. Every law firm has different personalities. Every law firm will make you feel good about yourself or badly about yourself. It's interesting when and I got to get to this seminar. So about try not to digress too much, but it's very interesting when people work in smaller markets or at firms in big markets where they find people that like them. Those attorneys typically stay with the practice of law. It's the negative feelings of inferiority and things that the people are escaping. Your environment and your ability to stay practicing law and be happy and stay alive is going to be affected by your environment to a massive extent. Sometimes law firms that are large can have a profound effect on your self-esteem. Other times, law firms that are, other times law firms that are small can have a profound effect on your self-esteem. Law firms that don't pay well, law firms with toxic people, all that stuff can affect your self-esteem. And lawyers are often the best lawyers at big firms, but not always. And they typically a lot of them have a bad way of thinking about the world. They have to be paranoid of clients, of other attorneys, of all this sort of stuff. And they are, and that ends up hurting a lot of them. And they have very unhappy families and very unhappy lives. And I've been at no firms where every single person has been divorced. Wow, a partner. And so why is this serious for attorneys? Now, this is just a statistic, but if you're a lawyer, you're 3.6 times more likely to suffer from retention than non-lawyers. And I don't know what the percentage is, but it's something like, it's huge. I don't want to quote it because I could be wrong, but I think it's like over 20% of people in the country are on antidepressants. Wow, lawyers are 3.6 times more likely to be depressed, and there's only 1,500,000 lawyers in the United States. Think about it. That's a lot of people. And attorneys are motivated by the highest levels of achievement. And that level of achievement means that oftentimes your ego is controlling everything. You can become incredibly unhappy. You can become alienated to others around you. And your ego is basically constantly judging how you're doing compared to others. And most law firms will be people that are doing a lot better. And you'll also see people that became business people that are doing better, or went into other careers and are doing better and making more money or happier or more successful because people get into different things and so this, because the law firm is so much about ego, and a lot of the people that get into them are doing it for the ego, a lot of them end up very unhappy and depressed. And then because a lot of them have had a lot of success in their lives, they've worked hard in college, they've sometimes have been the first person, or they did it because their family was a lawyer, or they just went to law school because they were completely motivated by achievement and doing well, which is the majority of attorneys and people that go to law school. A lot of attorneys will use that failure to achieve the results they want as a reason to be unhappy and depressed. And this is just, how it works. And I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't that way. Other professions are stressful too. Being a dentist is one of the most stressful professions for whatever reason. There's a lot of unhappy people in different professions. So this is just a question, like, when depressed attorneys been depressed and can get through it. And it's weird. Wow. We have, I don't know what it is, but it's over 500,000 attorneys that have contacted our company looking for help out of the 1.5 or 6 million in the country. And so that's a lot. And at this point, we don't even advertise because I don't think we do, because there's so many of them. But what happens is we email and send out job alerts and all this stuff. And we're always getting these responses, not every month, but maybe every 2 weeks, or sometimes it's every week. And I'm their wife or I'm their father, checking their email account. Can you please close it because they died, and then you get to the bottom of that and you find out that something bad happened, which is unfortunate. This is just, this is attorneys that I know. Give me 1 second. This is probably okay. But this week, when I wrote this, I found another attorney that I know that died and killed themselves. And then when I wrote this piece, it was the second I'd known in the past few months that this had happened to. And then the first is, like I said, the first person I learned of was someone who lived with next door neighbor in a house in college. And then the most recent one was someone that I went to high school with. You can imagine that's quite a few people that I'm running into. And these are just people that I knew personally and was friends with at some point in time. These people, when I knew them before they became attorneys, they were some of the most motivated, happy, and enthusiastic and people I met that I knew of. They also were people that were very happy and enthusiastic about becoming lawyers. But I think when they did, the first disappointment is probably not getting into a top law school, then probably, even though they did really well in college, probably not getting to the best law school, then probably not doing as well as they wanted to in law school. Or one of them actually did very well, went to a great law school and got a job at a big firm, and the other got a big firm but in a smaller market. So most of them found themselves coming up short. And what I think is that the reason all this happened was because these attorneys were trying to play at a very high level. And because of the people they were around and the feedback they were getting, that made them feel poorly about themselves and also their own lives. And think about this. And when an attorney throws himself into the largest law firms in the largest cities, a lot of things can change in terms of their psychology and happiness from these environments. I see things all the time. I see one woman I knew, one of her eyes exploded, or part of it, because part of her eye, I think her eyelid or something, because she'd been up for 3 days. I seem to hear about lots of people getting out of the practice of law or not because of like these immune disorders. And they're always in like large cities. Whatever, but that just seems too much of a coincidence, because a lot of attorneys are not working in those largest cities. And so that, from my perspective, is part of the problem. But so what happens is, because of these stresses, a lot of attorneys become much more likely. But I've been speaking with attorneys for 20 years. I speak with them in large firms, in small firms, in firms in all sorts of cities. And in almost every case, when I encounter attorneys in the smaller markets, the less competitive markets, the markets that don't seem as much the typical law firm, what happens is these attorneys are often, the ones in smaller markets are often actually much happier and less likely to be unhappy like the attorneys in the largest market. So I think the rule is that the more outwardly successful an attorney is, the happier they're likely to be. That's just really, I think, how it works. And unfortunately, that is what I've seen. Just give me a second here. So there's a little bit about the psychology of attorneys, and it's most pronounced, I think, in the largest markets. And what kind of has happened is the law has been somewhat industrialized. And what that means is that there's more assembly line type work done in firms. There's more levels of management. There's more levels of attorneys. And the quality of work is much higher, and billing rates are the highest. The amount of hours you need to bill is the highest. The qualifications of the attorneys around you are the highest, and the attorneys are really expected to be the best. The hours are the highest. The jobs are hardest to get. The competition to become a partner and get ahead is often impossible, but sometimes it is possible. It's very difficult. Your coworkers are competing for very few partner spots or for work. So they're pretty much out to get you a lot of the times. Even if you don't realize it, you're probably out to get certain people as well. It's kind of survival of the fittest. And because these firms are so competitive and so much is going on, partners and everyone knows you're more likely to just be passing through and never going to be a part of really the firm in the long run. And so the larger the firm, many times, not all of them, there's some incredible large law firms that are very good to work in, and not this way, but the law firm becomes almost like a corporation. You read about people getting fired from corporations every day, and CEOs resigning, having issues, or mass layoffs and all this sort of stuff. And the large law firm kind of starts imitating its clients, which tend to be large clients or large companies and have a certain way of doing things. And that's actually how that's how Cravath grew as a law firm. They were one of the first people to represent IBM and people like that. So our willing nature of law firms can destroy your life force, because you're fighting, but nothing good is happening. You're not getting any positive reinforcement. And the people that put themselves into these most competitive environments, again, have often been playing this competitive game. And so this recent attorney I know, another one that's not the most recent, died about 7 months ago. He was in his mid-40s. And again, I looked up to see how he was doing. and at his current firm, because I like to follow up with all my candidates and see if we become partners and all that kind of stuff, or just see how that's going on. And then he ended up, for reasons I couldn't understand, as a solo practitioner, which means he probably lost his job or something. And then when I looked him up on the state bar website of Florida, I found out that he'd been disbarred for stealing $90,000 from a few clients. And then 2 days after his death, he was then disbarred in Michigan for what happened to him for the same offense in Florida. He'd obviously had a decision made about his disbarment literally after he died. Again, I did some research. I'm like, how did this guy die? And I found the first thing I found was like a remembrance page or something on doing a Google search. And then I'm like, my God, this person we knew died. When I went to a school with my graduating class of maybe 30 men. So I contacted some of my high school classmates, and all of them were surprised. And these are people that he was in constant contact with. They didn't know he was dead. He left 5 children that were from ages 3 to 12. And obviously they're going to grow up without a father. And so when you're stressed and when you're having problems in a law firm, even if you don't kill yourself, but you're going to have collateral damage. And this particular guy was literally one of the happiest and fun person that I could imagine. But he did have drug problems in the past, and I'm sure that may have relapsed. And then when he was in the law firm, I don't know, and maybe he stole the $90,000 from his clients to get drugs and not get caught, and got caught. So I have no idea how he died, but I'm pretty sure it was a suicide. And that's what people intimated that I talked to, but I don't know after they found out. I've seen lots of people die, and they seem not big funerals. I don't know why that is, but when you go to these remembrance pages, if you see popular or well-known people, there's tons and tons of comments and things about how wonderful the person was. And when you see these pages, sometimes there's 1 or 2 or none. And it's wow. And why is that? It's probably because they prioritize work over creating important relationships, staying caught up on existing relationships, and being like lawyers are, that maybe not as pleasant as they could be. And that's how it works. I think people that are attorneys often have, not all attorneys, of course, but a lot of other attorneys are taking care of people's legal problems, but something's missing along the way. So it's you're billing hours, or you're spending all this time away from home, or now with remote work, not as much, but you're competing with your colleagues. You're constantly worrying about getting work sometimes, or if you have work too much, then you worry about getting clients. Then a lot of attorneys, and it's not as common as it used to be, but a lot of them will numb their self and their feelings to get through with buying things or sex or substances or other types of achievement pills. But the idea is that because of what they're working all the time and they don't have the ability to form the most meaningful relationships and stuff or keep in touch with people, they have to resort to that kind of stuff. The idea is that this high school colleague that I just mentioned, I think something that fed his weakness and his problems. And he always wanted to be loved and liked and admired. And I believe he maybe went into the profession because he thought that the prestige and the money and the power or whatever would help him. But he still had a hole inside his soul. But probably because this particular guy, I remember, had to live with his grandparents in high school because his parents were experiencing, or one of them was experiencing drug problems and the other was missing, meaning just not around. He knew it was alive, but not around. So he'd grown up and then ended up getting left with his grandparents. And I think he was probably in pain from that. And maybe even though he got happier later, he had to go to a private boarding school, not in Florida. And I doubt this was healthy. He didn't feel loved by his parents. He didn't by his grandparents that were in the same town. But as the world reflecting back to you, that this made him feel not alone. And the school we attended was all about achievement. It was about being the very best student, the very best athlete, and the best at everything. A lot of kids in my class, I don't know what it was, but at least 25% of them went to Ivy League or Ivy League level schools, but meaning maybe not one of the Ivy schools on the East Coast, but also places like Duke and Stanford and places like that. And some people were raised to be the best at everything because they're surrounded by people that are like that. It's like that in a lot of schools, and it's like that in very good public schools. It's just you surround yourself with people that you achieve with, and then you set your barometer to what the people around you are doing. Meaning, if people from your school are becoming very successful, then you crave that attention, and you also try to post on Facebook or call up people and tell them, or send things to your school, which I've never done, but it's always fun reading, to get in different magazines and things that they publish about what people in the class are doing. So they become also, most people that I knew from that school all became doctors, lawyers, or MBAs and that sort of thing. And so the psychology of the people you're around is going to be make you try to do the best at everything you are. And the nice thing is when you get that exposure when you're young, you go to college and you probably try very hard there, and a lot of people stop trying, so you do well. But the idea that you get when you start achieving a lot, when you are getting positive feedback from schools and grades and everything, is then that you start realizing that's a big positive feedback. That's where you're going to get your self-esteem from. So think about how proud people are when they get into law school, how proud they are when they do well in college. All these things are things that kind of drive your self-esteem. But if you work in a lot of large law firms or very competitive law firms that are smaller, mid-sized firms, you're going in an entirely different level, because now you're competing with people that probably did pretty well in college, that invested a lot of money in law school, that probably tried the best they could. And if you get into a large law firm, you're taking that to the absolute highest level of competing at a different level. There's this thing called the Peter Principle, and which is funny that people can, and I think it's called the Peter Principle, but it may be something else, but people will rise to often be promoted beyond their capabilities and fail. People have said that about our current vice president. They said that about Jimmy Carter, but they say it about politicians and things all the time. And it also happens with law firms. And your sense of ego will often determine who you become. So this particular sense is many people that are lawyers don't always get it from their parents because parents were building them up. They may not get it from other people and things. I don't know. A lot of attorneys that I know will have a story that, oh, I was a bad student and then I turned everything around. And then that suddenly is like this huge thing that happens to them where they're getting better self-esteem when you're in school. That's the most important thing, I think, for a lot of people. And so then people start trying to build their success with money and other types of things. And that never works, by the way. If your self-identity is based on, and your happiness is based on things you can't control all the time, which is, it's very hard to control your outcome in some firms. It's very hard to control that the firm's going to always have work for you. It's very hard to control that when you apply to different firms in different markets that you're going to have success because of different hiring standards, or who knows, or just that they even have the work at that point in time. Like right now, for example, corporate is really bad. Corporate attorneys are having a horrible time. It's not pleasant. And so imagine if you were working a couple of years ago as a corporate attorney and recruiters were knocking down your door, firms were knocking down your door, everybody wanted you, and now it's gone. Wow. It's not because of anything you did, it's just because of the economy. People to cope with it, not probably even half of corporate attorneys, but a lot of attorneys, and that doesn't work, especially when they get into law firms. They need to do other things to fix what's happening on the inside, and it makes them feel depressed, alone, and very frustrated. And you may feel that way right now. I don't know, but it's because of your self-identity being connected to something that you can't always control, or that, as another thing, the way of putting it, is actually out of control, meaning, so it makes you feel depressed and frustrated. So you have to understand whether or not your ego's in check. And if it's not, your ego's affecting how you feel, you have to understand how you can fix it. And so this particular guy, like I said, was damaged. One day when I was art class, I'm not good friends with him, but we're hanging out. He came to this art class I was in. It looked like he was skipping class. He walked over the door to see what I wanted. And he said, it was something that wasn't really known at all at that time in my particular school. But he said, I've got some coke. And he was from Florida, where he was having problems. And it gave him a strange look. I was a young kid. The worst I'd heard of was a lot of people obviously smoked pot and drank and stuff, but I'd just never been exposed to that kind of stuff. And turned around. And I wasn't a goodie by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, I would say I was a troublemaker to some extent, and definitely drink beer and stuff almost every weekend. But this seemed a little bit extreme. And that's just the kind of thing that people get expelled for. People usually get expelled for cop, but that would be something. This particular guy was very happy, but I realized a loner, trying to hook up with as many girls as possible, which I guess is not necessarily unusual for guys, for all guys. but to the extent I was associated with him, this is just, he would talk about his different exploits, and I knew they weren't true. And he ended up working in a lot of large law firms. And then by his 20th high school reunion, was going around telling everyone he started some huge internet company that had made hundreds of millions of dollars. And none of this was true. And I didn't understand this because I placed him. So it was just completely made up. But I haven't been at that reunion, but he told a lot of people about it. And obviously, I'm concerned about the way someone saw him, wanted to look good on the outside and to show others that he was successful. So this is a game that people play. I'm not saying all lawyers are like this, because they're not. And as a matter of fact, I think a lot of lawyers, of course, are very happy. But from a young age, this particular guy was very concerned about how he looked to others. And what also happens to people, some people, not all people, is you meet people and you try to tell them, and they try to tell you how happy they are, how successful they are. And the people that often do that are more likely than not to feel the opposite of that inside. I know I meet people all the time that went to great colleges and whatever, and they tell me about it within the first 3 minutes. I don't know how that's relevant when you're my age, but and they are too. But this is often people that didn't achieve what they thought to. So they run back to something that they think makes them look successful from a long time ago. And your value should really come, and this is the problem. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect and I don't struggle with this, because I think a lot of people do. But your value should be internal and not based on how you look to others. And the people that are internally successful really get a sense of themselves that comes from the inside and not the outside, meaning they believe in themselves and they're able to push forward. And if you look at a lot of politicians, and business people, look at what it would be like to be someone like Musk or Zuckerberg or important politicians, and all the negative feedback they get. If they didn't have something on the inside that made them pick themselves up again and again, that made them believe in themselves and think highly of themselves, regardless of what happened, none of this would be happening. They would figure out how to fix it. And again, so if you start trying to overly emphasize how you feel about things externally and how you look to others, you're never going to be happy. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. Being a lawyer in a law firm does exactly that. It makes them believe that you need to be something on the outside to look and be successful. And when you're an attorney, and especially in the most competitive firms, which again do not have to be large law firms, you're often under a microscope where people are always waiting for you to make a mistake or miss a deadline or make a typo or upset a client or say something inappropriate to you and more. I remember when I got in the first law firm I was in, one guy took a call from a reporter, and that ended his career, at least in law firms, because he was fired after 2 or 3 months and said all this stuff to the law firm that the reporter that ended up in the local legal newspaper. People that are been fired and their careers ruined because they forgot to do something, put a verification on a discovery request or something. So much stuff can happen, and small mistakes can have fatal repercussions to your career. So why wouldn't anybody be paranoid? I knew a guy that was fired. If you read this, he was like weeks, or not even weeks, like a couple weeks from being made a partner at a major like AmLaw 50 law firm with offices around the country. And I think he moved there from a firm that wasn't as prestigious. And then he was asked if he had sent some letter to the client the day before. And he said he had, and then the partner didn't trust him and logged into his email or the company system to see if what the document looked like. And he realized that it hadn't been sent. Bam, just fired. And then pretty much blackballed in the entire legal market in Los Angeles, because the firm was very eager to tell everyone that he was dishonest. And I think he moved home and started doing contract work or something. It's just, wow. Again, you have made major mistakes in your legal career, and it's important to understand what happened, because many people on the outside, how others think they look on the outside, and they don't confront their feelings. And sometimes you believe that you can only love yourself if you're loved, and you look a certain way to others. When you think about it, the legal profession isn't perfect, but it's often bred on all these externalities, like where you went to law school. People remember that. They talk about it. It's a big deal to them throughout their entire careers. The good law schools are that. The poor law schools are that. The medium law schools are that. Your law school performance, people talk. I met a woman that was working for me as an attorney. She was in her mid-70s, and everyone she talked about how she'd gone to University of Texas. It was a good law school. But is that appropriate to do 50 years after you've been in law school? I guess it is, if your self-esteem is based on that. And people also do their law school honors. They list order the coif and things on their profiles. Their self-esteem is based on the firm they're working in or the firm they worked in. I've met people that have worked at these incredible law firms, even as paralegals, like Skadden and things like that. And they talk about it their entire careers, even though they might have worked as paralegals in 10 other firms after that. So their self-esteem is based on that, the firms, your clerkships. I've met people that were clerks for judges in various cities, and then for years are still going to reunions and meetings of everyone that was a former clerk of every judge in that city. Wow. Or like every federal district judge. I don't know. I guess it's a good networking opportunity, but people also are very concerned with their bonus. So when people don't get good bonuses at their firms, they become very upset. They're very damaged by it. That's another thing. Then you have your law firm title, the clients you have, your billing rate in the law firm. People think about that, how much you're making compared to your peers in the firm, how much the law firm's telling you they gave you a higher bonus than others, or your class year, all this stuff, where you live, and people like that. But then the big one about attorneys is with each other is they're always talking about the neighborhood they live in. I don't know why that is, but that's important to them, that they live in the right neighborhood of a city. They start talking about if they belong to them different clubs, and get a tremendous sense of importance out of belonging to certain places. They often will be very excited about when they buy a new car and talk about that. Their children's achievements, their basic social standing, their children's school, the vacations they take. That's another one people look forward to and talk about all year. Then when they get very successful, they start talking about their charitable giving. They're concerned about the size of their bank accounts, their firm's performance financially, and their allies and other people working for them, their friends, their work friends. And it just never ends. You could list 1,000 different things and you would not come up short. But all of these things that I'm talking about, that some, not all, one, maybe, but are probably important to you too. They're not eternal, meaning your self-esteem is not coming from who you are. Your self-esteem is not coming from any of that. It has nothing to do with your happiness. And ultimately, when you buy a car, you may feel good driving out of the dealership and for a day or two, but that's it. And then you'll just take it for granted. They'll provide us short-term happiness and make you feel better about yourselves, or more likable than others, but are more likely to make you feel better about yourselves. But if you're working all the time and just cranking out all these hours and getting all this negative feedback, then what you have to show for it is really what there is. And it's your reward, externalities, because if you don't feel good about yourself on the inside, then you use external things to feel better about yourself, which everyone does to some extent. Some people more than others. And even our spouses will often do that. They'll feel important because their significant others, or a husband or wife is an important attorney. It's just they go to good schools, or they have the nice house, or in the right neighborhood. People just do this. They define themselves based on these things, then who your friends are, who their friends are. So you have to ask yourself, how much does external things matter to you? And in capitalism, which obviously not everybody likes, they have turned to communism in lots of places because of the distrust and hating of capitalism. There's obviously in the United States, if you just look at what's going on with different political parties, and there's a move towards socialism and that style of thinking that, and it's becoming more and more popular because under capitalism, you have the haves and the have-nots, and what everyone tries to do that's a socialist, or not all of them, but will try to make it so everybody has an equal income. So the highest income people are taxed very highly. So the people that live in the biggest houses that are most expensive are taxed. If in LA, there's this new rule that if you have a house over $5 million and you sell it, that you have to give the government, meaning LA City, $250,000 to support the poor. I know that a homeless, meaning homeless people should, regardless of how much you bought the house for, or regardless of how much you owe on it. So you might owe $5 million on a house that you have to sell for $5 million so it lost value. You're still going to have to pay $250,000. And then, of course, if it's, or maybe it's $225,000, it's a 4% or 4.5%. And then if the house is over $10 million, then you have to pay, it would be $500,000 because the tax goes higher. So the idea is that the capitalism and so forth is something that a lot of people don't like, but you buy into that to a great extent when you work in large law firms, because the reward for what you do is money. And then attorneys will then buy into the idea that, the sacrifice of their time and working hard will give them the money, and with this money, they're going to be happier. And there is there's a level of income where people actually are happier. There's been studies, you could look them up, and I don't know what it is. It's if they make around over a certain amount, they're happier. It's not a huge amount of money. It's something that most attorneys make, but it doesn't always apply for every profession. I've seen attorneys get up at 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. to take a bus from a neighborhood. It's just because they want to live a certain place. And so the attorneys will often sit on a train for a few hours each day. They'll go back and forth to the desk, and they'll sit under fluorescent lights and bill hours, be criticized. You're working with people that might be out to get you, and often work alone and rarely feel any sense of true accomplishment or connection at the largest and most successful firms. This is how it works. And this stuff about emphasizing how you look on the outside, not how you feel on the inside, is a big deal. And attorneys often do not feel good on the inside. They continually go after these externalities and define themselves by that. And it doesn't work. It can kill you, or make you very unhappy, or drive you to numb that with substances and pills. And when someone is in a relationship and they're unhappy, they may cheat. There's just all sorts of things that happen. In my experience, a lot of the best attorneys in large law firms in the largest cities get divorced. I don't know what the percentage of people in the country gets divorced, but I'm sure it's much higher. And on all these behaviors, food, sex, and so forth, will often mask how you feel, because if you feel good on the inside, you don't need to do this stuff that's harming you. You would be centered. So a lot of law firm attorneys do dream of different lives, or going in-house to escape this sort of stuff and judge themselves poorly in their value of the world. And obviously going in-house is another way to try to fix it, or going to another practice setting. But often you still have that drive within you to do everything a certain way. So that hurts you. And again, part of the training of an attorney is to constantly question everything, to find small errors, to come up with arguments about why things are bad. And just imagine doing that with your spouse or yourself, which is what they do. So if you are constantly critical of yourself and others, what does that do to you? And it creates a mindset that's not very pleasant. It's not the kind of mindset that doctors have. It's not the kind of mindset that most people have, but you're actually go to law school to learn this. And then when you go into the best law firms, it's even more emphasized because your billing rates are higher and you're competing with more. All this stuff is hard. And the best attorneys, I'm sorry, but what makes a good attorney is your ability to find the very smallest errors and being hyper vigilant about exposing every one of those errors and weaknesses, no matter how carefully hidden they are. And all day, every day, attorneys are examining their work product and the work product of other attorneys, and they're finding small errors in that work. And that is how it works. They're finding errors in the opposing side's work. They're finding errors in other people's contracts, other people's litigation papers, all this stuff is what they're doing. And if these errors are their errors, then the attorney is immediately going to fix them or risk being called out by their superiors or the other side or a judge. That's what judges do. They point out and they rule on who's got the better stuff with the fewer errors. Again, you're constantly thinking, and not everyone's doing this, but it's because of this, you're constantly thinking about all of your weaknesses and you're constantly aware of all of your errors. You're like a well-polished brief. Attorneys understand how they look on the outside as well and do what they can to look perfect. And come on, this is what it is. And as you get more senior, you're expected more and more to make fewer and fewer errors. And then you're judged on that if you're a promoter in your law firm. Does looking for weakness? I don't know. But I think it causes stress. And one of the most successful attorneys I know who's very happy now became a partner at a major law firm, and Quinn Emanuel, where at some point, I don't know if they still do it, but years ago, they were paying anyone that was a partner pretty much over $3 million a year. So he did very well and made partner when he was very young. But he retired when he was in his mid-40s. And he was mid-40s. And he was my mentor. And he had a view of himself and the profession that I think was unusual. He wasn't a mentor in the sense that he was telling me what I needed to do and stuff, but he was a mentor in the sense that he knew all the information of the firm. He was careful about what he said. He was very well politically, and people liked him. But he'd grown up in a good family and didn't come from a family of lawyers. And I think he saw people that were competing with one another, saw people that were billing the most hours, saw people playing the game to succeed and how they went crazy doing it. And he did something that, in retrospect, was very easy to do to get through all this. But now that I think about it, it was very immature. He just didn't compete. Think about that. He didn't compete. He realized that he needed to bill a certain number of hours. He made sure he did. And then what he really concentrated on was being likable, having good relationships with others in the law firm. And he tried to enjoy the people that he was working with. He became friends with partners as an associate. He did things like go hiking with them alone on trips and things that were very powerful. He made friends with all the younger attorneys. They liked him. And he was able to find happiness in an environment where other people were simply going crazy and off the rails. He even found time to exercise several times a week. He just competed and succeeded without actually competing. He'd go, and I guess he'd like to swim every day. So he joined this kind of swim club that was downtown in Los Angeles and go swim laps and make sure he kept himself up. And I think he realized how crazy what was going around him was, and he just didn't compete. He also didn't try to hurt others. That's very interesting. Like his psychology made him such that he emphasized connecting with others and not tearing them down. And that's very interesting. And again, I think that his response was probably one of the most mature responses I've ever encountered. He didn't allow himself to be sucked in. Now, what is it important to understand about this particular guy? Just a couple things that I think are useful to know. He was from a very nice family. He talked to his parents every week. He went to visit them a lot. He had been raised by people that loved him a lot. And so I don't know, I'm not saying that he has had the best way to navigate all this psychologically, but I believe that the most mature way means you have a realization that if you play the game the way it's being played, it's not going to make you feel good or ultimately be successful. This is how it is. And this is what I think. And I hope this has been helpful for you. Now I'm just going to take a quick break for 1 or 2 minutes. And then when I come back, I'll answer any questions anyone has about this or anything else. And then that'll be it. So before I get started, I did want to share with everyone just one quick thing about kind of the way law firms are, just because I think it's very interesting. And how things that I think you should understand if your objective is to work in a law firm, or if your objective, here we go. If your objective is to stay in a law firm or go out. And so at our company, we represent over 100,000 law firms. And then the reason I'm telling you this is not to sell you on what we do, but tell you how difficult it is to understand every law firm. Most recruiters and people in this business, and I'm not being critical of this, I love it that people are in the business at all, but most recruiters and placement firms, there's a couple services they subscribe to that spider the websites of the largest 200 firms. And that's why, and then they get their jobs, or they end up, they buy different lists of candidates, and then they get their job. Then these services, there's two of them, will sell them jobs in each territory. So if you want to do Los Angeles, you pay one fee for a subscription. If you do another, if you want to do Orange County, you pay another one. If you want to do the Bay Area, you pay one for San Francisco. So when they contact you, that's pretty much what they're selling. And they're selling these kind of publicly available lists of jobs, pretty much. And that's why if you're an attorney in a big firm, or are going to be, you will get cold calls for people in your practice area, or emails and things trying to convince you to use them. So which is something that's fun to know about, and people are proud when they get a lot of calls. The calls come depending on market demand for attorneys like you in your practice area. They come more often in large cities because that's where most of the recruiters are. But pretty much recruiters know about those jobs, and they have a little bit of insight into the cultures of them. I want to just make you understand that when you are searching for a job in this type of economy, or interested in finding a job, all of the, and you start taking firms and not applying to them, and doing all these things and not applying to different markets, and not applying to big firms and small firms and or whatever, it's very difficult for you to actually make any conclusions about any law firm. I saw once, not too long ago, a woman that was from a big firm and agreed to go out on an interview with a firm in California that had six attorneys, or not even that, four. It had the owner of the firm, and then it had three associates. And so she went to interview with this firm. It was in a small kind of rundown strip mall type of office. And she went to this firm and interviewed, and everyone was sitting at these crappy desks and the carpet, just not a nice place. And she said, after interviewing them, she was not nice to them when she was there. She was nice, but not really nice. And walked out and just called me. It was like, this firm there's no way they can afford to pay me, and this sort of thing. And so the guy that owned the firm called me, and he said, this is a 4-person law firm. So I just want you to understand like how little you know about law firms, because this could determine your happiness and success. And so this is very important when you're applying to places and you're doing a search on your own, how little everyone knows about law firms. So the partner called the partner, he called me, I don't remember. And he said, she's very qualified, but she doesn't seem to like us, all this stuff. And I said, I think she might be a little bit concerned about how much you pay based on your offices, and that it's probably not going to be a good opportunity for her. And he said, we have the offices we do because we want our clients to think that we're not making a lot of money, and that we're keeping costs down so we can keep their billing rates down. And I was like, wow, that's very interesting. So you're telling me that basically that this is why you're doing it. And some law firms will do that. Quinn Emanuel, by the way, did that. They used to be in these kind of crappy offices, even though they were doing incredibly well. But I said, wow. So I said, how do you pay your associates? And she said her billing rate would be, I don't know what it was. It was a decent amount, probably the equivalent right now of $500 or $600 an hour. Her billing rate would be $500 or $600 an hour. It might have been $600, I don't know. And I let my associates keep half of all the money that they bill. Wow, just think about that. She bills 3,000 hours, she makes $900,000. This is back then. She bills 500 hours, she bills 2,000 hours, she makes 600,000. Just wow, not even in a very expensive area the firm's in. So this blew her away. She went there, she couldn't believe it. She was happy. She was sending me holiday cards every year, emailing me how happy she was. It changed her life. And so you don't know when you apply to places, and different law firms, you don't know what they're going to pay. You don't know how easy it is to make partner or hard. You don't know if the firm's going to require you to get business. You don't know if the firm's going to take your resume and be interested in you or not, because they have different human resource departments and management, and people leave and they need to replace them, and different practice areas are growing at different points in time. And when just all this stuff, so you just don't know. They could be laying people off. They could be eliminating practice areas. They could be starting practice areas. They could be having financial issues. They could be growing. They could be closing offices. They could be starting offices. They could be trying to open another office. You don't know this. They may have people that are sabotaging hiring. They may have people that are not. Decisions may be. So you just have all these factors that you can't possibly be aware of. And so all I'm telling you at this point in time is, if you're not happy, what you need to do is you need to apply everywhere you possibly can. I say this because if you get rejected, who cares? The firm may be laying people off. They may not, who knows? They may not like people from your law school. They may not people from your firm. They may not like people that are coming from the government. They may like people that just don't know any of this. And so that's part of my strategy at BCG. 85%, by the way, of our placements, think about this, 98% of recruiters, not all of them, but most of them will only send you to firms that have open jobs and things. But 85% of our placements are at firms that don't have jobs. So this is what you do in a recession. This is what you do in a bad market. I was having an email exchange with some of our recruiters this morning, and what always happens, I don't know why this is, but despite my training of this information, recruiters in big offices like New York kind of always think they know what they're doing. They talk to other recruiters from there, and they pretty much only send people to big firms that recruit for big firms. Anyway, they recruit for big firms. They work with the attorneys that have the qualification to work in big firms. And so now we have recruiters there that are doing nothing but this. And in New York, most of the people are corporate attorneys. Corporate is basically laying people off right now. They stop, and that's what they're used to. So they stop making placements and they start having all these financial problems. Now, let me tell you what happens when people do this, when they start applying to lots of different places. We had recruiters in the 2008 through 2011, when the people in New York were very unhappy and leaving for different professions and not making money. These recruiters actually followed what I asked them to do and what I told them to do. And they started doing this procedure, but with smaller firms in Chicago and then smaller firms in the suburbs of Chicago, because they're only recruiting in Chicago. And they had their best years ever. Think about that. Like, better than in a good market following this. Because what happens in slow markets and things is the jobs and the hiring, the smaller firms get more work because their billing rates are lower, and they have more opportunities because they have more work. And they look at it as an opportunity to hire talent that they might not be able to get in an average market. So in a good market. So that's what you do. And I'm just providing this information to you because I want you to succeed. And this honestly is the best way for you to do that. So let me just open this. There was your document, and I will start taking questions. Let's see here. Okay, this is a good question. So I'm going to answer all these questions. I'm not taking in the order that I received today. I don't know why, but I will. Okay, in cases where a law firm is aware of an attorney's mental health struggles, what obligation do they have in terms of providing support and attention to prevent attorney suicide? Okay, so now I'm going to say something that you don't like, and it's going to be devastating to hear. The problem is if you are having these problems, you cannot tell anybody in your firm about them, unfortunately. You can't. If you do that, you don't know what the reaction is going to be, and you could be toast. They certainly do not want people with these problems talking to their clients, and they know that this kind of stressful environment is going to hurt them. So this question, in case where a law firm is aware of attorney struggles, what obligation they have in terms of providing accommodations to prevent. So the thing is that the law firms pretty much won't help you. And if you tell them about your problems, they may actually end up, pushing you out or not making you partner or starting to figure out how to get rid of you. There was a story. I was talking to this woman not too long ago that was working in an entertainment law firm. And in that entertainment law firm, they were meeting with, who were they meeting? I don't know. They were meeting with an expert to help testify or something in the case that she was working on. And so they were meeting with the expert at like the Ivy or something. And it was just a cool hip restaurant in in Los Angeles and Melrose type area, I think. And anyway, they were meeting with this person, and at some point in the lunch, he said, "Oh, I forgot to take my lithium," which lithium is something that is used for, I think, manic depression. And so he left and went out to his car to get it and came back. While he was out, all the attorneys were laughing and making fun of him. And then they were like, "We definitely do not want to use this person as our expert." Think about that. And this is a recent example and something that happens to attorneys as well. If you have problems, substance abuse problems, if you have mental health problems, I certainly do not recommend you tell your firm about it because that could be career suicide. You need to figure out how to deal with it. And if it's the firm that's causing it, then you need to find a new job. That's all. You need to go into a different practice setting or find a different firm that's going to match it. That's why I'm telling you about the fact that different firms are different types of environments. And what's the point of being in an environment that's going to make you feel that way? I always wonder, and again, I'm not saying that this is you, and I'm not saying this is the right decision, but you always have attorneys that are not liked or will never do well in large law firms. Sometimes they want to work there on a temporary basis. Other times they take titles that they don't deserve, they don't want, that are lower. They'll be called a managing this or careers this and what's the point of competing in something where you're never going to succeed at the level you otherwise could if your self-esteem is based on that. So that's just a thing. But I do not believe that it is a good idea to make people aware of your struggles. Even things like your law school classmates, and anybody you tell will pretty much tell everyone else. And so you need to, and if they don't, that's weird because that's just what lawyers do. If they do, which the idea is probably that they will, because at some point they will say something if they're competitive with you, if they just don't have the moral character to not tell people. Most people don't. And so they will tell other people. And if it doesn't come out immediately, it'll come out at some point in time. And so that's how that works. And so you definitely need to be very careful. It's about substance abuse. It's about mental health struggles, even things about that people may not approve of, which are your political leanings, your past mistakes, your always that sort of thing. As a lawyer, I've always taken great pride in my accomplishments and reputation. How do you strike a balance between a healthy ego and an ego-driven mindset that could lead to detrimental consequences? Okay, so another good question. So the idea with that is that your ego needs to be put in check. And how do people put their egos in check? And I'm going to say some crap right now that is not kosher, that I'll get in trouble for. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for, but I'll tell you what people do and what's been found for some people to be very effective with doing this. So some people, one of the things that I like is they'll meditate. This is a great way to put your ego in check. Other people instead of meditating, they may use different types of psychedelics and things, some of which, if you read the Wall Street Journal and other things, apparently actually can help you with your ego, even when therapy and stuff may not. And what are those psychedelics? They're everyone you can think of. It's LSD, it's ayahuasca, like mushrooms. I'm not even aware of what all of them are, but that's, again, I'm just going by something in the Wall Street Journal that I guess a lot of people do, and then I investigated. So I'm not promoting that, and I'm certainly not telling you to go use illegal drugs, but I'm telling you the lengths that people go to and to eliminate their ego, because the better your ego is, the better you'll do. I've met people in India is very good. There's a lot of people in India, and I've worked with hundreds of people in successful roles there over the years. And you could say the most awful things to these people, and most of the time they're not going to get mad, or because it doesn't affect their ego. So this is a great characteristic. Most Americans you say something mean to them, they'll lash out. If you disrespect them, they'll get mad and they'll feel badly about it. So all these problems often happen with people that emphasize your ego. So there's nothing wrong with being pride in your accomplishments and reputation. You should try to have good reputation and good accomplishments. But if you don't, then that's okay too. Or if your ego isn't controlling you, you're going to do better too. Now, why is that? That is because if you're not able to take pride in that, if you're not able to let your ego control everything, you have that much more headspace to think calmly about what you're doing and to think calmly about how these issues and things you're facing. And you make decisions based on information in front of you and not how it affects you and what other people are doing. I had an interesting experience once, and this is a funny one, but this is when I was at law school at University of Virginia, which I shouldn't even say, but I just don't even know why that matters. But I was taking a class with this guy named Saul Levmore. I don't know what it was, 15 years ago, became the dean of University of Chicago Law School, which I think is like ranked number 2 or 3 or something. I don't know. It's a great law school. But anyway, when he was at Virginia, I remember I turned in this paper for his class, and he gave me a B or B plus or something on it. I don't remember, but it wasn't a grade that I was happy about. And because I've always written a lot, which I think you could probably see even on his website. And so I took the paper and I printed it up, and then I mailed it to a bunch of law review offices at, I don't know, top 50 law schools or something. And then one or two of them, I think three or four of them actually eventually contacted me. But I think one of them contacted me right away. And they said, we're interested in publishing this. We're excited about it. And they actually didn't end up publishing it, but they took it and they said they were going to publish it. But then I think it was about evidence law or something. And this thing that I wrote about it no longer overruled. I don't know. But so I called Saul Levmore and I said, hey, do you remember the grade you gave me on this? And he's a very smart guy. I went to Yale Law School and all that. And he said, no, I don't remember. And I said, you gave it a B or something, a B plus. And I said, guess what's happened to it? And he said, what? And I said, well, it's been accepted for law review at, I don't know, University of Minnesota or whatever the school was. And it's going to be published by then. And then he said to me, I bet you feel very good telling me that, don't you? And I said, why? And he said, because you care so much about what other people think. And then he hung up the phone. So I thought that was very interesting. And I always remember that, because essentially what he was saying is that's what motivates you. And this is one of the smartest and academically and most successful, I would say, people in the United States in the legal profession. So just something to think about. And I thought it was very interesting. Okay. Oh, by the way, if you type out questions, which this last person did, I won't certainly show your name. Didn't put their name. So the person said, this is a great webinar, or doing this webinar. Oh, they did say it's a great webinar. It's a 20-year diversion from law practice. Perhaps I went too far in the direction of seeking health and balance. So yeah, that's why a lot of people get out of it. What I'm just telling you is you don't have to get out of it. You don't have to get out of law firms. You just need to find the right law firm. And you ask, how do you find them? One of the things about finding law firms is very interesting that I should just mention, if you're looking for a job right now and is that how many law firms there are. There's all these lists and rankings and vault firms, or I guess it's not called vault anymore. There's chambers, there's, I don't know, all these top list of firms and that people always apply to. When I was in school, everyone would apply to only the NOUT firms. And I'm like, that's crazy. So when I was moving from clerking for a judge in Michigan to Los Angeles, because basically I didn't want to move to New York because my fiance at the time spent all her time with her aunt, and I had to spend all this time with her aunt, and we never went out. So I was like, I'm not going there. And she ended up moving to LA. So I was applying to firms in Los Angeles. So instead of just applying to these NOUT firms, which every attorney does, and most of them, when they're in law school, get rejected, I decided to apply to all the firms and maybe like Martindale as well. And that I thought were good firms. And then I got so many interviews in LA that I can only afford to be there like 3 or 4 days. So I couldn't do all the interviews. But the point is that everybody wanted, you just have to find the right place, and everybody can find a good firm. What you can do now, which is very interesting, you can search on Google for law firms, and those law firms will come up, and whatever your practice area is, it's fascinating. So you can say trust and the state's firms, this is just an example, in Milwaukee. right? I'm just giving you a random place. And here you're going to get all these results. These are a bunch of results. And then look at this. So all of the Google will actually show you all of the trust and estates firms. How awesome is that? You just have to keep going. And the thing about these firms, and you can go to their website and find out how to apply or email the hiring partner. The thing about these firms is most of these firms are not going to be on these lists that you're going to find. Most of them are not going to be on any directories and stuff, because listing your firm in a directory like Martindale, I don't know what it is. It's thousands of dollars. And then you have to pay for each attorney that they have. So this is really, look at this. I'm on page 4 here, and I'm still finding people so that's all trust and estates litigation, succession planning, like all this stuff. So there are so many firms out there that you can work at. It blows my mind. You would not find these if you weren't doing these Google searches. You can also find them on different lists. You could go top attorneys in Detroit, just any location. You do that, and then you're going to get this, and then you might get, here's different things that are sponsored, and then you've got Yelp, and then you've got Justia, and then you've got Super Liars in Detroit. So you just look at this and you can go, oh, what about banking law? And then you see these people, and then you can see what firms are at. These are just some simple public ways of finding attorney and people. Like, wow, how awesome is this? So that's how you can do things. And what do you do when you find those attorneys? Most of the time, they're going to be in law firms you've never heard of, but you look at the law firm page and you see what's going on there. And then you put that firm on your list and you contact that attorney, or you contact the recruiting department. But come on, this is easy. It's not, but this is stuff that people don't do. And so I'm just trying to tell you the way that I think you should do it. And because it's very easy to get a job in a law firm. You just have to improve the scope of what you're doing and see everything out there. So if you look, I'm just going to say this, if you look at the largest directories, you are going to see about 5%. There's some 10% of the market. If you are smart enough to search Google, you'll probably see other 90%. So think about this. I mean, come on, this is how people get jobs. And we do it in other ways. Like we look at the history of all these firms, how much they view resumes, how many people that they hire, if they're growing or shrinking. But this is stuff you can do on your own. And you don't have to be smart to get a job. You don't have to, you just need to approach the right firms. I had a woman once, it was the worst attorney I ever hired. She was, she was in her 60s and just smoked and looked like hell and didn't have an experience in good firms. She'd done stuff like work for the government and was an attorney, like processing different things. And anyway, so she walked into my office and I had an office at that point in time in downtown Malibu. She walked into my office and she said, I know you have this job opening because I saw it advertised. I work down the street. I also know who you are because you helped my daughter find a job or something. And or my daughter knows who you are. I don't remember, and I really would like to work for you. I hired this woman and paid her over $100,000 a year. The only reason I hired her was because she basically was like, oh, I like you. And I was like, that's great. So I don't have to recruit anymore for this job. The person lives close by. It's hard to get people to work in this particular city because it's 40 minutes outside of really any location, maybe. And so people don't want to commute there when there's plenty of jobs in other places. So I hired her. She wasn't a good attorney. She was horrible. And it was the kind of thing where she turned in something and I'd have to spend hours fixing it. So the point is that you can find a job. Look at this. Here I am, an expert supposedly in hiring attorneys, but I fell for this person. Now, if you would come to me and you were a good attorney, you would probably be making a lot more than whatever she is. So it's just, I don't have a job right now, but I'm just saying this is how it works. And so you have to learn how to approach people. You can walk into their office or you can contact them. But if you do it enough times, it's going to work. And this is how you get jobs. How 85% a BCG candidate to get jobs. So I'm just telling you, it's 10 times more effective than anything. Why? Or 8.5 times, whatever the percentage is, the number is. It's more effective to search for a job this way because when you do, you're the only applicant. You're not competing with often hundreds of others for the same job. These firms do not have jobs on Indeed or Law Crossing or on their website. Maybe many times they can't even afford a decent website with that kind of information. Most of them can't. They just have static pages and stuff. Or they don't even have HR people to post jobs. Look, just think about this. Think about what you're doing when you're searching for a job. And I can tell you how freaking easy it is. It's beyond easy. Now, why is it beyond easy? Because I've been doing this for 25 plus years and I know what I'm doing to some extent. Even though I can't forecast every firm, I know that if you apply to enough places, you're going to get a job. There's just no way. Even if you were at the bottom of your class at a bottom law school, you're still going to get a job. None of this stuff matters. Even if you're 70 years old, you're going to get a job. Even if you're unhealthy and 70 years old, you're going to get a job if you do things right. But if you don't, then you're in trouble. But you need to apply to a lot of places. And I'm just trying to help everyone in this call. People don't buy into this. When I do this with candidates, I have a very hard time because a lot of them won't be like, what's this guy doing? He doesn't know what he's doing. But it works. You have to do it in the firms with the right practice area and everything. But you can really completely turn your career around doing this. So what is the best way to approach a half-hour interview with a recruiter at a new firm? The best way to approach an interview with a recruiter is to be frickin' nice as hell to them, to be gracious, and to make them feel that they're important. And that's absolutely the most important thing. Now, why is that? Because most recruiters aren't attorneys, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're in an environment with a bunch of attorneys, you often feel like a second-class citizen. Now, I'm not saying all recruiting people feel this way, but it's just in the air. And so if someone comes along and is nice to them and respects them and seems eager, and then they're going to prioritize you above other candidates because they want to bring in people that like them and think like them. And so you need to be very nice, and you need to be outgoing. You need to be, to the extent you can, relate to them and be professional. You need to do everything you possibly can to get along with them and be nice. So that's just where I'm at with that. And what I think, this is what works. It doesn't work if you come in and you're stiff and overly professional. It may work in some firms, but if you act like you don't respect them, if you act like you don't respect the secretary or the person behind the front desk, if you don't follow up with the recruiter at the firm, all this sort of stuff is very important. And making people feel important that are not often treated as well as they should be in law firms or given the status will go a long way. So how does that work? So let me just tell you how important recruiting coordinators are. Recruiting coordinators they save the partners and things time. So they will go in and they will recognize and promote certain people over others and sell them on the firm. I learned this, by the way, when I was clerking for a federal judge. And how did I learn it? We interviewed all these people for replacement clerk for the people that were leaving, including myself. And at the time, and this is just a funny thing, but these Mormon missionaries kept coming by my apartment and just giving me all these lessons and stuff. And I didn't become a Mormon, but I couldn't believe how nice they were and how much they were helping me. And one time they asked me if there was anything I could do, and I had all this asphalt equipment. I'd be like, it'd be really nice if someone cleaned off my asphalt equipment. And they brought the freaking whole church and spent like a whole day like cleaning out my asphalt equipment. They're cleaning it. I'm like, what the heck? Who are these people? So we had all these great applicants from Michigan and all these great schools around and all over the country applying. And this Mormon guy applied, and I'm like, these are really good people. And I'm young, but I want to promote them. So I found every reason that the judge should hire him over the better people, and he did. So that's how it works. And with recruiting coordinators, they have the same power. They can be more powerful than partners. They decide who gets your resume. They decide at the end of a screening review or screening who they interview some more. So that's the best way. You have to go out of your way because the recruiting coordinator is the absolute most important person in the firm. You have to, in terms of you being hired, and they may not always be, but a lot of times they are. Sometimes like people, they're human. They may be leading the firm. They may be all these different things. But in general, you want to be as nice as you can to everybody. The people, there's a saying in the Bible, I think it's be nice to the poor, nice to everyone, because in doing so, you may be being nice to an angel in disguise. And so that holds true for recruiting coordinators as well. So I often joined a new firm. My prior smaller firm laid off several associates. I was fortunate to join this firm about 4 months ago, as it is a national brand and I'm able to specialize. That's good. Specializing is good, by the way. This is very good. And again, just to interrupt this question, the more specialized you can make your resume in one practice area, the more interviews you're going to get. So you have to look specialized, because if you look like you do a bunch of things and the law firm is a specialist law firm, or they have an opening for a specialist, or you're in a rare specialty or something, and they don't get a lot of applicants like you're going to get hired. Like if you're in New York, you'd say you do M&A and securities, or you do that, and the law firm has attorneys that only do M&A. They have attorneys that only do securities. And obviously, if they have an opening or they're hiring someone in securities and not M&A, if you put both of those in your resume, what are they supposed to do? So it's okay to mention that you've done some of that, but you don't want to look like you're not specialized. And same thing with applying to law firms. If you're applying to, I'm just going to do this at every level. If you're applying to a personal injury law firm that represents auto accident victims, and your experience is doing personal injury for representing, I don't know, some other type of injury, come up, I don't know, medical injuries, or then you're going to have a much better chance of getting a job if you're a personal injury in the same thing. So you have to do that. And that's specialization. And it's the biggest mistake that candidates working with BCG make, or on their resumes. It's like, I can't help people and tell them why this is. I had a guy, by the way, this is very interesting. I had a guy recently that paid, was it like, I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000 for me to spend, and I get these people a lot, but he had this resume where he's doing all these different practice areas. And then his decision was that he wanted to move into another practice area. And I took a look at his resume, and I could only find one consistency of the type of work he did. I think it was like, I don't know, like insurance defense or something. And I want to be a data science attorney, and that's all I'm going to apply to. And I need to make my resume look like that. And I was like, listen, man, you don't have any experience in it. The law firms with this, not data science, data privacy. The law firms that have these jobs are larger firms. You don't have any employment stability, about all these things, blah, blah, blah. But I can definitely do a resume for you. And after looking at you and talking to you, I can definitely get you a job in any of these other things and give you a resume that will do that for you. And I did it for him right on the phone. And he was upset. I did on a Zoom call and said, I need to do data privacy. I was like, all right, but nothing's going to happen. So sometimes people go down on these paths with specialization where they try to switch practice areas, why would the firm hire someone that's trying to switch practice areas when the person's already shown that they don't want to be in a practice area? And they're probably going to do the same thing with a new practice area. And moreover, they don't even have the experience to be hired. So why would a firm do that? Come on. So you have to specialize, and you have to try to specialize in whatever you're doing, or at least make it look like you've been specialized by modifying your resume so forth. But this person says they're able to specialize, which is good. But the branch office of this firm is volatile. Partners are rarely present. Associates have left. And I had a run-in with a partner. Another firm wants to have a phone interview this week that is a competitor and most prestigious. How should I probe my moves and desire to switch? Okay, so there's a couple points here. The big one is you never say anything negative about your current firm in interviews. You just don't. Because if you say negative things about your current firm or your past firms, then it's not good, because the firm knows that you will say bad things about them when things don't work out, which they usually don't. So this is a basic 101 interviewing. It's the most important thing, but people always do this, and they don't get jobs because of it after interviews, and they don't know why. This is one of the reasons why. So you never say anything negative. You can, however, position yourself as wanting to work on more important or on larger clients, more specialized matters, larger clients, more specialized matters, and all that sort of thing, and similar stuff. But you can't, and so that's what you do. Now, this firm could be melting down, which is possible. And branch offices are by their nature volatile. The reason branch offices are volatile is because what happens in them is a lot of the decisions are made by the main office, and branch offices are often started with people from local firms that were unhappy there. So they bring all that unhappiness and all the dysfunction to the DNA, or the recent DNA if it's a newer firm, but to the DNA of the branch office. So the partners are scared, the decisions can be made, they don't have control over them because they're made in other offices. So there's a lot of problems with branch offices. Now they can be good too, because the opposite can happen. They can make more partners in there to make people in the branch office feel like they're important. They can make them without less requirements. There may be less competition. So there's all sorts of good reasons to work in branch offices, but in general, they can be very scary. And you do need to work out with them. I remember this Bill Urquhart, who was one of the founders of Quinn Emanuel Urquhart Sullivan, was the second named partner, asked me where I was interviewing at when I was working there, or not working there, but applying for a job there. And I told him 3 or 4 firms, like big firms in LA. And he just said, be careful of branch offices. And that's all he said. Didn't say anything negative about it, but be careful. You should be careful of branch offices. And all these things sound like maybe a good reason to look at something else. Okay, let's see this next one. Okay, sorry. I think that's wrong. I don't know what that one is. These are great questions, by the way. Thank you, everyone who's asking them. I recently had a run-in with a partner at my firm. He offered some input on potential compliance issue I thought had been missed. I offered some input on a potential compliance issue that I thought had been missed and presented in a nice way. The partner got furious and was screaming at me in front of the office. Should I leave? What was my mistake here? How should I handle a possible weakness that I find as a new attorney in work by partners or others just for the purpose of being helpful, showing my diligence, or this is a political mistake and should I just leave? So there's a couple different things going on here. The first one is cover your ass, which you're welcome to do, but the other one that's even more important, I think, is in addition to covering your ass, you have to understand that the partners that are asking you to do certain things are really asking you to find ways to make things work, So make things work and make the client happy. So what does that mean? That means that you may present some issues like that could be looked at, but if the partner needs a certain result from that, meaning it will result in more work. It will, that maybe they don't want to point out a certain issue because if they do, that may piss off the client or it may result in less work, and it's not pleasant for the partner to learn that they may have missed an issue. So the way to frame issues is basically to come out and just say, hey, these are some issues that this is how we're going to make this work. And these are just some issues and that you could maybe put in a footnote or something, but don't make it seem like you're trying to tell someone they can't do something. Your job is really as an attorney. So this is another thing which a lot of people don't understand. Your job as an attorney is to find a way to make things work. That's it. So you need to do this. And that's what you're hired to do. If you want to be a buzzkill and you want to not make things work, you don't want to find solutions for the clients, and you just want to be a negative person about things, then other people aren't going to use you to do more work. The clients aren't going to benefit from it. Because what lawyers are doing is they're making all these judgments about, can I risk this? Can I risk it for the clients? My client's going to want a good result. If I don't give them a good result, they're not going to use me in the future. So these are all things that are going across and happening. So yes, you can show diligence, but you need to present a work product that, and this, by the way, this is one of these career changing questions. So I'm really glad you asked that, because if you do this well, your whole career and life could change. So you definitely need to do it well. And a lawyer has to find ways to make things work. So just think about what happens in court. Someone's accused of murder. The whole lawyer can't just throw up their hands and say, oh, it's pretty obvious this person did that. No, a good criminal defense lawyer, and why the best ones charge millions of dollars for cases, is they go and figure out how to make things work, their defense. So this is like that in all practice areas. It's like that in corporate. It's like that in real estate. You have to find ways to make things work. And so you can't, your job is not to not make things work or to say why it's not going to work. Your job is to make things work. So this lesson, by the way, lots of attorneys never learn. They don't advance because of it. Clients don't hire them because of it. All these things, like, you need to be seen as an advocate for clients and also the people you're working for. And if you're not, then you're in trouble. And so I think that's just something that's important for you to understand. If you're not, you're in trouble. Again, this is just a freaking awesome question. If you stayed around for the webinars, there's all these questions, that alone is worth time. Incredibly important. No. So you never want to say, oh, should I mention my hours? Yes, you should. If your hours are good, you should mention them. Yes. You can also give the impression without lying. So yes, if your hours are good, you definitely need to mention them. Why? Because regardless of the economy, the best lawyers in law firms that give partners and their clients the best results, and capitalizing this by making things work stay around. So and this, again, just hugely important question and answer. I really am glad people are answering these, because this is really a good question. This is what happens. So in every top law firm, there are attorneys that are working 3,000 hours a year, and people can't stop giving them work and they want to stick around. And then there's attorneys in the same firm that might be billing a few hours per week because no one's giving them work. The attorneys that are billing a few hours a week are just not very pleasant to get the work back from. It's okay to say, hey, this is the problem, but this is the solution I have, and this just completely will work. And if we do this and this, that's awesome. That's what they want. That's thorough, but you're taking a stand to help the client. You can't just turn in all this negative freaking work. No one likes that. This is funny. I hired this law firm to represent me in some stupid matter. It was pretty stupid. It was a litigation thing in Texas. And these attorneys were like, the entire firm, which was like 10 people, were all board of the COIF and just University of Texas, and I mean, really good attorneys. But I was like, why are these attorneys all working together in this little tiny firm, and they don't have big clients? I was applying about a stupid little litigation case. And the reason that I discovered was all these guys would do is just point out the negatives. They were just critics, and they just couldn't take a stand about any issues. And then I saw them argue something in court, and it was the same thing. Like, they were non-persuasive. And then the opposing side in the case I was in was all over. He was jumping up and down, doing everything he could, and he won. You need to be able to take a stand. And so the question is, should you mention your hours? Yes, you should always mention your hours, because hours mean people are giving you work, and you are doing good work and getting repeat business. So an associate in a firm is essentially an independent business person that's paid a salary, but an independent business person that is providing work to other independent business people that are also associated with the same group, which are the partners. Partners are paid based on the amount of business they have, and essentially the billings that they get are the money that comes in. There, a certain percentage is taken out for the overhead of the firm, and then to pay more important lawyers or other lawyers, depending on what's going on in the economy and also their importance. One practice area is busy. They're paid a percentage of what they make for their business. Yes, if you are doing good work and getting repeat business, then you definitely want to say that, because, or even imply it if you're not, meaning say I worked this many hours in this big case or something, then, which is, you don't have to talk about the specific hours, which means you're getting repeat business. You definitely want to often do that as well. Okay, so yeah, you want to mention that. Just looking at this question under the monitor. Okay, so this is this question. So I've heard you mention that generally you work with a low percentage of people who reach out and get placements. What is the factor that BCG and or you self-consider determine whether or not person is in placement? Okay, this is a great question. And this, just so you understand the reasons for my answer, over half of, close to half of the attorneys asphalt equipment, I'd be like, it'd be really nice if someone cleaned off my asphalt equipment. And they brought the freaking whole church and spent like a whole day like cleaning out my asphalt equipment. They're cleaning it. I'm like, what the heck? Who are these people? So we had all these great applicants from Michigan and all these great schools around all over the country applying. And this Mormon guy applied, and I'm like, these are really good people. And I'm young, but I want to promote them. So I found every reason that the judge should hire him over the better people, and he did. So that's how it works. And with recruiting coordinators, they have the same power. They can be more powerful than partners. They decide who gets your resume. They decide at the end of a screening review or screening who they interview some more. So that's the best way. You have to go out of your way, because the recruiting coordinator is the absolute most important person in the firm. You have to, in terms of you being hired, and they may not always be, but a lot of times they are. Sometimes like people, they're human. They may be leading the firm. They may be all these different things. But in general, you want to be as nice as you can to everybody. The people, there's a saying in the Bible, I think it's be nice to the poor, nice to everyone, because in doing so, you may be being nice to an angel in disguise. And so that holds true for recruiting coordinators as well. So I often join a new firm. My prior smaller firm, White Offshore, was associate. I was fortunate to join this firm about 4 months ago, as it is a national brand and I'm able to specialize. That's good. Specializing is good, by the way. This is very good. And again, like, just to interrupt this question, the more specialized you can make your resume in one practice area, the more interviews you're going to get. So you have to look specialized, because if you look like you do a bunch of things and the law firm is a specialist law firm, or they have an opening for a specialist, or you're in a rare specialty or something, and they don't get a lot of applicants like you're going to get hired. Like if you're in New York, you'd say you do M&A and securities, or you do that, and the law firm has attorneys that only do M&A. They have attorneys that only do securities. And obviously, if they have an opening or they're hiring someone in securities and not M&A, if you put both of those in your resume, what are they supposed to do? So it's okay to mention that you've done some of that, but you don't want to look like you're not specialized. And same thing with applying to law firms. If you're applying to, I'm just going to do this at every level. If you're applying to a personal injury law firm that represents auto accident victims, and your experience is doing personal injury for representing, I don't know, some other type of injury, come up medical injuries, or then you're going to have a much better chance of getting a job if you're a personal injury in the same thing. So you have to do that. And it's specialization. And it's the biggest mistake that candidates working with BCG make, or on their resumes. I can't help people and tell them why this is. I had a guy, by the way, this is very interesting. I had a guy recently that paid, was it like, I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000 to me to spend, and I get these people a lot, but he had this resume where he's doing all these different practice areas, and then his decision was that he wanted to move into another practice area. And I took a look at his resume, and I could only find one consistency of the type of work he did. I think it was like, I don't know, like insurance defense or something. I want to be a data science attorney, and that's all I'm going to apply to. And I need to make my resume look like that. And I was like, listen, man, you don't have any experience in it. The law firms with this, not data science, data privacy. The law firms that have these jobs are larger firms. You don't have any employment stability, about all these things, blah, blah, blah. But I can definitely do a resume for you. And after looking at you and talking to you, I can definitely get you a job in any of these other things and give you a resume that will do that for you. And I did it for him right on the phone. And he was upset. I did on a Zoom call and said, I need to do data privacy. So I was like, all right, but nothing's going to happen. So sometimes people go down on these paths with specialization where they try to switch practice areas, why would the firm hire someone that's trying to switch practice areas when the person's already shown that they don't want to be in a practice area? And they're probably going to do the same thing with a new practice area. And moreover, they don't even have the experience to be hired. So why would a firm do that? Come on. So you have to specialize, and you have to try to specialize in whatever you're doing, or at least make it look like you've been specialized by modifying your resume. But this person says they're able to specialize, which is good. But the branch office of this firm is volatile. Partners are rarely present. Associates have left. And I had a run-in with a partner. Another firm wants to have a phone interview this week that is a competitor and most prestigious. How should I probe my moves and desire to switch? Okay, so there's a couple points here. The big one is you never say anything negative about your current firm in interviews. You just don't. Because if you say negative things about your current firm or your past firms, then it's not good, because the firm knows that you will say bad things about them when things don't work out, which they usually don't. So this is a basic 101 interviewing. It's the most important thing, but people always do this, and they don't get jobs because of it after interviews, and they don't know why. This is one of the reasons why. So you never say anything negative. You can, however, position yourself as wanting to work on more important or on larger clients, more specialized matters, larger clients, more specialized matters, and all that sort of thing, and similar stuff. But you can't, and so that's what you do. Now, this firm could be melting down, which is possible. And branch offices are by their nature volatile. The reason branch offices are volatile is because what happens in them is a lot of the decisions are made by the main office. And branch offices are often started with people from local firms that were unhappy there. So they bring all that unhappiness and all the dysfunction to the DNA, or the recent DNA, if it's a newer firm, but to the DNA of the branch office. So the partners are scared, the decisions can be made, they don't have control over them because they're made in other offices. So there's a lot of problems with branch offices. Now, they can be good too, because the opposite can happen. They can make more partners in there to make people in the branch office feel like they're important. They can make them without less requirements. There may be less competition. So there's all sorts of good reasons to work in branch offices, but in general, they can be very scary, and you do need to work out with them. I remember this Bill Urquhart, who was one of the founders of Quinn Emanuel Urquhart Sullivan, was the second named partner, asked me where I was interviewing at when I was working there, or not working there, but applying for a job there. And I told him like 3 or 4 firms, like big firms in LA. And he just said, be careful of branch offices. And that's all he said. Didn't say anything negative about it, but be careful. So you should be careful of branch offices. And all these things sound like maybe a good reason to look at something else. Okay, let's see this next one. Okay, sorry. I think it's wrong. I don't know what that one is. These are great questions, by the way. Thank you, everyone who's asking them. I recently had a run-in with a partner of my firm. He offered some input on the potential compliance issue I thought had been missed. Oh, I offered some input on a potential compliance issue that I thought had been missed and presented in a nice way. The partner got furious and was screaming at me in front of the office. Should I leave? What was my mistake here? How should I handle a possible weakness that I find as a new attorney in work by partners or others just for the purpose of being helpful, showing my diligence, or this is a political mistake and should I just leave? So there's a couple different things going on here. The first one is cover your ass, which you're welcome to do, but welcome to do. But the other one that's even more important, I think, is in addition to covering your ass, you have to understand that the partners that are asking you to do certain things are really asking you to find ways to make things work, So make things work and make the client happy. And so what does that mean? That means that you may present some issues like that could be looked at, but if the partner needs a certain result from that, meaning it will result in more work. It will, that maybe they don't want to point out a certain issue because if they do, that may piss off the client or may result in less work and it's not pleasant for the partner to learn that they may have missed an issue. So the way to frame issues is basically to come out and just say, hey, these are some issues that this is how we're going to make this work. And these are just some issues and that you could maybe put in a footnote or something, but don't make it seem like you're trying to tell someone they can't do so. Your job is really as an attorney. So this is another thing, which a lot of people don't understand. Your job as an attorney is to find a way to make things work. That's it. You need to do this. And that's what you're hired to do. If you want to be a buzzkill and you want to not make things work, you don't want to find solutions for the clients, and you just want to be a negative person about things, then other people aren't going to use you to do more work. The clients aren't going to benefit from it. Because what lawyers are doing is they're making all these judgments about, can I risk this? Can I risk it for the clients? My client's going to want a good result. If I don't give them a good result, they're not going to use me in the future. So these are all things that are going across and happening. So yes, you can show diligence, but you need to present a work product and this, by the way, this is one of these career changing questions. So I'm really glad you asked that, because if you do this well, your whole career and life could change. So you definitely need to do it well. And a lawyer has to find ways to make things work. So just think about what happens in court. Someone's accused of murder. The lawyer can't just throw up their hands and say, oh, it's pretty obvious this person did that. No, a good criminal defense lawyer, and why the best ones charge millions of dollars for cases, is they go and figure out how to make things work, their defense. So this is like that in all practice areas. It's like that in corporate. It's like that in real estate. You have to find ways to make things work. And so your job is not to not make things work or say why it's not going to work. Your job is to make things work. So this lesson, by the way, lots of attorneys never learn. They don't advance because of it. Clients don't hire them because of it. All these things, like you need to be seen as an advocate for clients and also the people you're working for. And if you're not, then you're in trouble. And so I think that's just something that's important for you to understand. If you're not, you're in trouble. Again, this is just a freaking awesome question. If you stayed around for the webinar, I mean, all these questions, that alone is worth the time. Incredibly important. No. So you never want to say, should I mention my hours? Yes, you should. If your hours are good, you should mention them. Yes. You can also give the impression without lying. So yes, if your hours are good, you definitely need to mention them. Why? Because regardless of the economy, the best lawyers in law firms that give partners and their clients the best results and capitalizing this by making things work stay around. So and this again, just hugely important question and answer. I really am glad people are answering this because this is really a good question. This is what happens. So in every top law firm, there are attorneys that are working 3,000 hours a year and people can't stop giving them work and they want to stick around. And then there's attorneys in the same firm that might be billing a few hours per week because no one's giving them work. The attorneys that are billing a few hours a week are just not very pleasant to get the work back from. It's okay to say, hey, this is the problem, but this is the solution I have and just completely will work. And if we do this and this, that's awesome. That's what they want. That's thorough, but you're taking a stand to help the client. You can't just turn in all this negative freaking work. No one likes that. This is funny. I hired this law firm to represent me in some stupid matter. It was pretty stupid. It was a litigation thing in Texas. And these attorneys were like, the entire firm, which was like 10 people, were all like Order of the Coif and just University of Texas. And I mean, really good attorneys. I was like, why are these attorneys like all working together in this little tiny firm and they don't have big clients? I was applying about a stupid little litigation case. And the reason that I discovered was all these guys would do is just point out the negatives. They were just critics and they just couldn't take a stand about any issues. And then I saw them argue something in court and it was the same thing. Like they were non-persuasive. And then the opposing side in the case I was in was all over. He was jumping up and down, doing everything he could, and he won. You need to be able to take a stand. And so the question is, should you mention your hours? Yes, you should always mention your hours because hours mean people are giving you work, and you are doing good work and getting repeat business. So an associate in a firm is essentially an independent business person that's paid a salary, but an independent business person that is providing work to other independent business people that are also associated with the same group, which are the partners. Partners are paid based on the amount of business they have, and essentially the billings that they get are the money that comes in. There's a certain percentage is taken out for the overhead of the firm and then to pay more important lawyers or other lawyers, depending on what's going on in the economy and also their importance. One practice area is busy. They're paid a percentage of what they make for their business. Yes, if you are doing good work and getting repeat business, then you definitely want to say that or even imply it if you're not, meaning say I worked this many hours in this big case or something, then you don't have to talk about the specific hours, which means you're getting repeat business. You definitely want to often do that as well. Okay, so yeah, you want to mention that. Just looking at this question under the monitor. Okay, so this is this question. So I've heard you mention that generally you work with a low percentage of people who reach out and get placements. What is the factor that BCG and or you self-consider determine whether or not person is placement? Okay, this is a great question. And this, just so you understand the reasons for my answer, close to half of the attorneys in the United States have applied on our website for representation or information about jobs and so forth in the past decade plus. I don't know, but that's a lot, right? So because of that, I've realized that not every attorney is, this is what other recruiters do, 98% of them, that not every one of those attorneys is at a big firm or could get a job in a big firm. And not only that, but if I want to run a business with hundreds of employees, it would be nothing short of insane to only try to work with the biggest firms because they only have jobs for the best attorneys at the best firms or people that are in very hot practice areas at one point in time. And every other recruiter in the world is sending them more candidates than they could possibly make do with. And because the second an opening comes out at a big firm in like New York, every attorney that matches that is cold called and emailed about that job. So why would I rely on my hundreds of employees, support their livelihood based on only representing people from the top firms and top schools? And I would if I didn't care about getting people jobs. I would if my ego was involved. A lot of recruiters come to this company in the past, and they'll only work with the best candidates for the best jobs. And because their ego is about, I placed this. And then what they then they go into, oh, I only place partners. I place people every day of the week. Like I make more placements in a week probably than 99% of recruiters. So what do? So the only thing I do that's different, and I do it all myself, by the way. I have data scientists working here. I've got hundreds of people helping me. But what do I do to do that and work with people? Here's the problem. It's getting better because I'm talking about this so much in the market, but a low percentage of people have a resume that is consistent or framed to be, or has a significant period of time when the person is in a single person is doing work in a single practice area. So what does that mean? That means that that you need to have some consistency of doing work in a practice area. But I don't care what it is. It could be I don't know. That's personal injury. It could be education plaintiff's work. Basically suing school. It could be patent prosecution for I don't know, for hard sciences generally, or which is just things that aren't alive. Or in large markets, people that only prosecute drug patents and discoveries. Or large companies, some for companies making a specific type of medicine. This is it. So anyway, so the more specialized you are, and sometimes this particular thing might give you 300 firms to apply to in a city. Through Harrison, by the way, not through another recruiter. Maybe 3 to 5, I don't know, but very long, maybe 3 to 20, and I don't know, but it depends on it could be 0 to 20. But so this is the way it works. So this is all I look for. I just want someone to be specialized. I don't care. I don't care where you went to law school. I don't care about your seniority level. I don't care about anything except that. I don't like people from in-house because most of the time they're not specialized and they've shown that they don't want to work in a law firm. So they're probably going to do it again. So I'm not a big fan of them. I'm also not but I still represent them. Same thing with people often in accounting firms, because many times they didn't get a job in an accounting firm. People that aren't very specialized in large markets, because large markets are where clients go for specialization. I'm not a big fan of them either. I'm not a big fan of people coming out of government, but I am if they're criminal and stuff, or they're federal law clerks, or even state Supreme Court and other state appellate. So these are all I'm looking for. I just need some sort of specialization, because in order to be marketable, you need to have specialization. So if you start working or trying to have all these things on your resume, saying you do all these different things, my experience with representing probably over 100,000 people, attorneys, or over years and decades, has been that the only people that consistently get jobs look specialized. That's it. And specialized, you're not going to get a job if you're trying to apply to switch practice areas. You could get lucky, but probably not. You're not going to get a job if you've got a bunch of different practice areas, moving between different practice areas on your resume. You're probably not going to get a job through BCG if you haven't worked as an employee in a law firm and you just had these temporary jobs and stuff, you might get a job as a data discoverer. But and actually you can get a job at Trademark and a few others. But the point is that this is how it works. The only thing that works if you want to get a job consistently is being specialized. So take a look at that. So an example would be employment law, right? So you have, and this is something that people don't understand, you have, and that's a pretty rare practice area. So you have attorneys coming from large firms. You have attorneys coming from labor backgrounds, which is different than general employment, labor backgrounds. You have attorneys that specialize in class action defense at a lot of big firms, defense of big firms. Not always. Then you have attorneys that specialize in just giving advice to companies about labor and employment issues. Again, this little piece I'm sharing with you right now could change your life. Employment, not labor issues. Because labor is separate than employment. Again, 99% of attorneys don't even understand this, unless they're employment attorneys, recruiters, wow, not laborers. Then you have attorneys that specialize in class action defense or class action plaintiffs work. Then you have attorneys that specialize in class action or specialize in individual types of lawsuits. Then on and on. And then even in California, you'll have specialized people in things like PAGA. And this is just plaintiffs. You'll have, I'm just giving you some of the crazy things. You'll have people that do, what's an example? Lemon law, defense, and plaintiff. And that's it. That's all they do. And if I get a lemon law attorney, hell yeah. Like they will, these firms that do plaintiffs work in lemon law, some of them pay $300,000 a year and they're desperate for people. Wow. Why? But no, most recruiters take a look at this and be like, oh my God, this person went to this crappy law school. They're doing lemon law. Isn't that funny? And person wouldn't get the time of day. They'd hang up. So the point is, if you're in one of these, if you specialize, there are hardly any attorneys that do labor. There are hardly any attorneys that do class action defense. There are hardly any attorneys that specialize in, there's more that specialize in giving advice. There's a lot of those, but there's not a lot. There's a lot that do plaintiffs work, but not a lot. There's a lot that specialize in individuals type of lawsuits. And so that's all I do. There's no secret to why I make a lot of placements and make them every single frickin' day. But it's just because I understand this, and you should too, because if you want to get a job and you want to have a good career, you can just coast through even without business many times if you are specialized, and you'll advance. Why are you specialized? Let's talk about that. Like, why? Not only are you more hireable, but clients seek out specialists. If you had a frickin' brain aneurysm, something growing on your brain, you wouldn't go see a general practitioner, would you? No, of course not. You would find a specialist. Clients are just like you. So why wouldn't they want a specialist? Do you think they want to go with someone that is listing 5 different type of specialties they do that are related or interrelated? No, the best clients that know what they're doing want the best people. So you would too. Come on, let's just be honest here. So this is the biggest mistake that so many attorneys make. And if someone makes this mistake, what the hell would I want to have to do with them? Because 90% of the time, 99% of the time, if I tell the attorney, hey, you need to make this more specialized, their response is, hey, I'm going to get more jobs if I look like I can do a bunch of different things. And I'm proud of the fact that I did corporate and litigation and a little bit of IP. I need to make people aware of that, because if they see one of those on my resume, they're going to be more likely to hire me. Hell no. If they see one of those on their resume, they're going to know you're not specialized. They're going to know you're dabbling in all these different practice areas. They're going to know that you specialize in it. They're going to know that you just want to learn a bunch of different things. They're going to know that you may not stick in the practice area you're in. They're going to know so many things, and they're not going to want to hire you because you've done a bunch of different things. The person that's going to get the job is a person that's specialized. Jeez. But anyway, this is something that I understand. I don't know why others don't, because I can tell you that having worked with over 100,000 plus attorneys, your odds are 20, 100, 50 times greater of getting a job and interviews if you do this. That's all you need to do. And you say, what do you do with jobs that are firms that are around that jobs I had before that weren't focused? You find out what the hell's focused on that, if it's related to your practice area, and you try to make it look focused. And if you can't, then you just don't say anything. You just list the firm name and just say, previously I worked with these firms. You don't need to talk about it. You can just put the dates. So that's what I would recommend. But you need to decide if you're plaintiff or defendant. You need to decide, what you want. Now, there is a caveat to this, and the caveat, which is very important to understand. So the caveat is, if you are in a smaller market where there are no specialists, or few to none, then you can look more general, because all the attorneys most of the attorneys are. So what does that mean? So that means if you're trying to get a job in what's a smaller market, it would be, any kind of big city in Wisconsin, Milwaukee or something. Most of the attorneys are going to be, if they're a corporate attorney, they may be corporate generalist and then do, M&A and some other stuff. And that's okay, because those kind of firms don't have a big client base or potential clients that a firm in some place like Detroit or a bigger market, Cleveland or something that has. So that you can do that smaller market. You can also do it many times with smaller firms that need everything that comes in the door, that need the work, and will put people on different things. So that's just how that works. So you can do that too. So that's a caveat and how that works. So I'm telling you that this works all the time. This works some of the time, but there is a caveat to that. And so that's important to understand that. An interesting thing too, that's interesting is sometimes within markets, there's these kind of weird things. So weird stuff. So it used to be stuff in different markets. So the example would be like patent prosecution. So this is very interesting. Anybody that's listening to this, you are so freaking far ahead of anybody you're ever going to practice law with, in terms of this kind of knowledge. But it's different markets. So what does that mean? Different stuff in different markets. That means that if you are like patent prosecution in New York City, so it's not as much like this anymore. Up until recently, you'd see these patent prosecutors there doing life sciences and patents, doing IP litigation, doing patent prosecution for trademark, and even hard sciences patent prosecution. Why would you see that in the largest market in the United States? What the hell's going on? The reason that happens is if you understand the market, and again, I don't think and I'm not bragging here, and I'm not going to say who it is, but I don't think there's more than maybe one person in the United States that understands this type of detail. But if you are in a thing like that, the problem is the billing rates for patent prosecution, for that kind of stuff, for this sort of stuff, do not even come close to what people are used to pay. They're too high to what companies are to pay for this type of work. Too high. And because of that, and patents are often done at a flat rate. So what happens, and this is just an example. So what happens there is the firms and big firms in New York will only do it for the clients willing to pay, which are probably really good clients. And they're not going to have a lot of that work because most of the clients won't want to pay it and will go to a different sort of specialist. But some clients will want them to do the work and they don't care what it costs. So if that happens, then they just hire a person who's a generalist. They can do the little bit of work that comes in and keep them busy. So there's just all these little things that you need to, that are work in the different markets. So smaller markets, you can often have more generalists. Smaller firms, you can often have more generalists. But what tends to work, and this is just a great question, what tends to work is the specialist. That's the people that get the jobs in the biggest and most focused firms and have typically the best careers, get the most clients and all that sort of thing. It says, mention the importance of, you can hopefully not hear my parrot in the background. You mentioned the importance of finding meaning and purpose in one's legal career. How can attorneys evaluate their goals and rediscover passion for their work if they find themselves caught in the negative spiral of depression and workout? I think I gave the example to you of an attorney that focused on outside things and not internal things in the way that he approached it. So if you choose to focus on negative things and aspects of things, what's going to happen is you're going to only see the world in terms of enemies and competition and all that sort of stuff, and not see the world as something where every human, as a race, is really communicating, is in it together. Every person in a state identifies with a state and is in it together. Every person in a city is really working together. Every certain person in a law firm is actually working together. Every person in a family should be working together. Every person that you're friends with should be working together. So everything, a country, state, political parties, religions, everything in the world is about working together. So seeing the world that way is a freaking sea change in terms of your life. And so what you need to do is you need to try to think about things that way. Or if you're getting depression and burnout, I don't think that you can maybe address it sometimes with different drugs and things, antidepressants or things that, but you're just covering up the actual real problem. And that's the issue. And you need to confront it. You can do things in the short term. And then the biggest thing to get out of depression and burnout is to learn how to get outside yourself. And what does that mean? And find people that support you. When someone is addicted to gambling, when someone's a sex addict, when someone is addicted to drugs, when someone is an alcoholic, they go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, or they go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, or they go to Sex Anonymous meetings, or they go to Gambling Anonymous meetings. And the 12-step programs are really based on people having a group that they go to that supports them in their weaknesses, and then learning to admit problems, then learning to, what else? Learning to, I don't know what the steps are, but it's learning to admit the problems, then writing everyone down that they're basically, I think, mad at, and they've had problems with, and figuring out what they did wrong in those relationships, and then writing down all the institutions they've had anger at, and then writing down the problems with that and what they may have caused, and then where there's problems, cleaning their spirit by apologizing for those problems to the people where appropriate and you can, then turning your life over to not necessarily God, but realizing that there's more to the world than you can see. And so you turn it over to what's called a higher power, and then work on that stuff all the time. So this, by the way, was not developed those steps are not from any current 12-step program. They were developed by something called the Oxford Group, which is I guess was something, I don't know, 1920s, or I don't know what it was. And Bill Wilson was exposed to the Oxford Group. He's the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what he did was he took LSD. I'm sorry, but that's what happened, and had some sort of spiritual awakening, and then turned over to this. Now, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying you should do that. And of course, anybody that's in any of these 12-step programs now would probably think that was insane. It would not support it under any circumstances. But that's what happened to him. And that's how these 12-step programs have essentially rescued so many people, millions, is by that. And then there's another thing that I just wanted to bring up real quickly, as there's a famous story. If you've studied Carl Jung, there's a famous story where, I don't know, some alcoholic or something came to Vienna, where I don't know if he's in Vienna, where he was, and to seek out his help and advice. And and to be cured because he was a psychologist. And Carl Jung was the most known psychologist at the time and famous, and paid all this money to go see him and work with him for, I don't know, weeks or whenever it was. And then he traveled back from this thinking he was cured. And I don't know, he was taking a train or something. And by the time he got from Vienna to London stuff, he had started drinking again. And so he called Carl Jung or to talk to him or wrote him a letter or something. He said, how did this happen? I thought he was cured. And then the Carl Jung said, in my entire experience, the only way people can be cured of what you're going through is with some sort of spiritual awakening, connection to some sort of higher power. So what does that mean? That's what yoga does in its most pure form, in things like India, where people spend years studying the discipline. It's what meditation is supposed to do. It's what God's supposed to do and going to church. It's what meditating does for people. It's what some people believe psychedelics does for them. So you need to connect with something outside yourself. And that starts with just social groups and people you connect with and maybe social media and things, but you need to find something outside yourself, because ultimately people are only happy to the connections they have and not concentrating and going into a deep chasm about themselves. It's just something to think about. It's a lot to think about. I tell you that as someone that has worked personally with some of the best people in the world that talk about this, and the people that are actually mean it, as opposed to ones that don't, because there's a lot of people out there that will say whatever they can to make money. But there are people out there in all sorts of environments, ashrams, meditate every day, all that sort of stuff. And those people are ones that benefit from all this. Okay, but you can too. There's this thing about Kundalini yoga, for example. It's called the householder's yoga, meaning it doesn't take a lot of time. It's got meditation. It's got all sorts of body poses and everything. And the idea behind that is it's something we can get the results very quickly. So there's all sorts of people out there that will do this to get the results. You can meditate. You can do self-hypnosis. You can see hypnosis. But all this stuff, and this is a really good question. I'm sure a lot of people have had it. The other thing is, how do you do it? Like, how do you make this part of your life? Making a part of your life might be doing something like meditating for 20 minutes a day before you go to bed, or making sure you exercise or take care of yourself spiritually, or going to church once a week, or finding supportive groups or people. And there's just so many different ways. But this is how you get out of it. You don't get out of it with substances. You don't get out of it by working harder. You don't get out of it by staying in the same environments if you can't handle it. That's what you do. So you need to really think about how you're going to approach it. But the only solution to all this is generally some sort of efforts to push yourself towards ego dissolution. And this is not my belief. It's the belief and approach of every single frickin' religion, of every single practice, that most of them that have been developed and stuck around for decades. I'm not going to, again, promote all this, but things like ayahuasca and boga and all these different kind of psychedelics have been around for thousands of years. Like, people have used this stuff. Now, does that mean that it works or it's proper? I'm not going to comment on the state of society or mushrooms but there's people that have been fighting and doing everything they freaking can to fix their ego and all this stuff forever. And that's how you do it. One way. Sorry, that's not how you do it. That's one way, but it just shows you how what you're talking about has always been there, will always be there, and will never go away if you don't fix it somehow. There's actually an interesting book by Wayne Dyer, and it's called Your Erroneous Zones. And what this book talks about and what it stands for, essentially, is that the erroneous zones are things like worry. They're things about focusing on negative things, or things about, and the idea is that every human that's ever lived has had the option to do this, to be depressed, to burn out, to focus on negative things. But the only solution is that some people spend more time on this, worrying about it, others spend less. And if that's where you put your focus, you're always going to be unhappy. You're never going to love your life. And that's going to do profound damage to you throughout your life if you don't fix it. And you need to. And again, I'm not saying that I'm perfect and I fix the stuff, because I freaking haven't. But I know I'm not 100% or probably even 70%. But this is what makes people happy. This is what changes your life. In one of your articles, you mentioned toxic partners you should avoid. It can harm your career. I believe that the mistake with working with such a partner, and he recently berated and insulted me when I saw an issue differently and tried to raise in a polite way. Several in the office overheard and now I'm anxious about my standing. I was told his reputation for this behavior. What do you advise? Again, you take it in stride. You don't involve your ego in it. You are careful to give it perspective. You learn to let it go. You find whatever you can do to let it go. So how do you let things go? I don't know. Let's just do Google, like maybe self-hypnosis. And again, I'm just telling you how many ways there are to let stuff go. So here you go. Hypnosis, let go of negative sleep hypnosis for letting go of relationships, for cord cutting, letting go of there's tons of stuff you can do on this. Now, why do I say self-hypnosis? Because it works for a lot of people. It's one thing, but you need to let stuff go. You're going to be more respected by this partner if you let it go and you're not mad and you just go from that psychology to something better and for you. Okay, thank you for the Google tips. Yeah, it's not just Google, by the way, to find jobs. It's all these small directories. Every city and stuff has a list of top attorneys. Every association has listed people in practice areas. There's so much stuff you can find. Okay, this is, can you share, again, your perspective of the qualities of the supportive law firm environment? Okay, so that's a good point. Great question. Another one. So what is my perspective? So what I think with law firms, especially, is I think the most supportive one is having acceptance no matter what. There are law firms out there where everyone makes partner. Literally, if you stick around. There are law firms where everyone is friends, but I think acceptance, no matter what, and security, no matter what. It's interesting to me, and there are firms. I remember talking to the highest paid law firm in the world, and as Wachtell, people work very hard there, but they also feel like they're supported. And if people and support, no matter what, and the more a law firm supports you, the more you feel supported. The more you realize that the law firm is going to take care of people, regardless as long as they're putting in their best efforts and not upsetting people around them. And that's what you need. You want to be accepted, and you want to have security, and you want to have support. So that doesn't always mean working in the largest markets or the largest firms. It can. Some of the largest law firms are very supportive, incredibly supportive. It's just, that's what I think, but others aren't. So some law firms are sick, just like attorneys, and just as law firms, just as attorneys are more likely to be sick, literally, physically and mentally, likely to be sick, physically and mentally. Physically and mentally. In large markets, they are also likely to be sick. Firms are more likely sick in these markets. So that's one thing that you should understand. Now, smaller law firms can also be sick. Law firms without enough business. Business can be sick, etc. Law firms in small markets, but you have to figure out what law firm doesn't appear sick to you. So the best way to ask that is you can ask what happened to the person that left, or what has happened to people in my position. my position, etc. Or where do people go? You can figure out those, and then you shouldn't, by the way, judge every firm that you're interviewing with by negative things. So it really, your experience is going to be your experience with people of a certain practice group that you're working with, people of a certain background, and practice groups are all different. The attorneys you're working with are all different. And what I mean by the attorneys you're working with, there are some attorneys that are partners that will leave unhealthy environments once they become unhealthy. And when they become unhealthy, the partner will leave and they'll take the associates they like to a new firm. Then if the associate's a partner level, they'll demand that person be a partner as part of moving, and all these things. There are partners that will move because the firm won't make their trusted associates a partner. So you just have to find acceptance. It doesn't have to be from the firm. It can be from people in the firm. You just have to look at it for what it is and figure out what it is. And that's really the best piece of advice. Okay, so this is a question. How do you research what niches in practice to pursue as a 1L if finding a lucrative practice is your goal? That can be your goal if you want. Sure, it can be your goal, but it's not a good goal. And I'll tell you why. Because everyone now, for example, is trying to do data privacy, because data privacy attorneys are paid a lot in big companies. That's ending. So now all of these people that were in that practice area and specialized in it when it was a popular practice area are having a lot of problems. Just everyone that specialized in office real estate is now having big problems if they were buying it. Anybody that tries to specialize in something that for the reason that you can make a lot of money, everyone who specialized in, most people that specialize in corporate, or many people that specialized in corporate now do not have jobs, can't get jobs. I can get these jobs, but most of them aren't using me or know my procedures, which doesn't mean they need to use me, or are getting jobs. So that are not going to, and people do that for money many times. So people do it for money. So what do you do if you want to make money? What do you do? You have to put yourself, okay, so you have to put yourself, you need to put yourself in a practice area, where you love and can see loving and are excited to learn about the rest of your career, because it appeals to you, because it does something for you. Does something for you. Hopefully, your spirit, I mean, I hate to say that, but because anyone that is good at something and likes something is likely to be good at it. And because you're gonna think about it, you're gonna keep improving, you're gonna see things that people that aren't interested aren't gonna see. You're gonna be interested in learning, you're gonna be excited, you're gonna be all these things, and you will make, it doesn't matter what it is. Again, it could be lemon law, it could be personal injury, which is people are motivated. I want to help people that were injured, and that brings, I want to get them compensation, and that helps people. So you just have to understand that anytime you go into something you love, it doesn't matter what it is. You can make huge amounts of money in every practice area that you don't think you're going to make money in. You only make money at something if you can be, money comes consistently and grows when you are in something, doing something with more enthusiasm than others, that taps into your natural skills, and you can see yourself being the best in the world. and where you are not competing with others. That's it. So that's all you need to do. So when you're not competing with others that have more enthusiasm, drive into them. So that's all you need to do. And you may make money in some practice area you hate and get paid a big salary, but you're not always going to be thinking about doing something differently, about you're not going to be happy. You're going to do the work, but it may not be interesting to you. You'll think about other types of work you want to do. It's just stupid. The last thing you want to do is do something that doesn't appeal to that. Also, I would say, and I hate to say this, but if you want to make money, the last thing in the world you should do is be an attorney. I've told the story before, but some of the frickin' richest people I know were attorneys, and they did other things where they made so much money, it was unbelievable. There's one guy I know, he's dead now, but from a cocaine overdose, but he's a neighbor of mine down the street, and he used to take me with him and my ex-wife and his wife to Las Vegas, where he would bet, to my astonishment, $250,000 a hand and happily lose millions of dollars in a weekend or make millions of dollars. And he had jets and get picked up in heavy jets at Van Nuys Airport to go gamble. And he was an attorney. He went to a law school called Whittier that's no longer in existence. And he decided he was just going to start at some point a credit card processing company, and did it and sold the first one to an Intuit for $70 or $80 million after he'd been out of law school for less than 7 or 8 years. So you can do things to make money. Was that guy happy trying to make money? No, I guess not. He had demons that he was fighting, but you can make money doing all sorts of things. There are auto salesmen in Los Angeles who make $500,000 a year just selling cars in dealership lots. There are so many things you can do if you want to make money, that practicing law against the most freaking competitive people in the world is not a good way to make money. No way. You have to be freaking motivated as hell to make money and go beyond anybody you're competing with in the market. You have to do everything you possibly can to make that happen. And if you don't, you're going to get smoked out, and you're not going to do things. One final story I'll tell, because it's a fun story. I know one attorney that, let me just see here. What was I going to talk about? I'm sorry, I'm just thinking. Oh, I'm not an attorney. I knew a guy when I was, and it inspired me a lot. I used to have an asphalt business, and I would drive around Detroit and nice suburbs. And I remember going to one of the, and I'd always ask people, are you an attorney? What are you doing? And I remember going to this very nice house of this guy, one of the nicest houses in this very wealthy city I was working in. And started talking to the guy, and I'm like, what do you do? And he's, oh, I clean all the windows in this town. And I'm like, what? And, he had all these Ferraris and this beautiful house and I'm like, what do you mean you clean Ferrari? You clean windows? And he's, yeah, I just have a bunch of guys, and we go down and they go out for me, and they clean windows in my city. They clean windows around this gross neighborhood, which is called Grosse Pointe. And basically he told me I paid these guys a little over minimum wage. Each team brings in or makes $2,000 or $3,000 a day. I've got 4 or 5 teams doing this. We clean them in the summer. We clean them in the fall. We clean them in the winter. No, I don't know if you say clean in the winter. In the winter, I think he was doing snow plowing. But anyway, so you can see how much money you can make just doing stupid things. Think about all these people that start all these internet companies. And so there's a lot of ways to make money. And you certainly can make them a lot of different ways. But what I would say is that if you focus on that in the practice of law, you're making a huge mistake. These are great questions, by the way. Thank you, everyone who's asking them. And if you have stuck around for this webinar so far, you are a superstar, because this is a lot of information, and being hungry for this information is the exact type of behavior, that type of attorneys that end up being incredibly successful in the practice of law. What I can tell you, just so you understand, is quite often, not at least once every couple of weeks, someone writes to me and they say, this information or whatever that you provided has changed my life, and I've followed everything and become very successful. Now, I don't think this is because of me. I think it's them, obviously, and sometimes they're like superstar partners and giant firms. But it's not because of me. It's just because in addition to me, I'm sure they're hungry for other types of information and learning. And so I'm not saying it is, but what I'm saying is the type of people that send me those are the type of people that are doing what you're doing right now, learning about all this stuff and trying to improve their lives and careers. Okay, so I'm making things happen for partners. I completely agree. However, I notice some partners with thin egos will refuse any way of making something work that isn't the way they see it. Even if it takes a high risk for a client where I present a particular reason. Are these partners incompetent? No, absolutely not. So this is what they are. They're no different. The partners are no different than a doctor diagnosing disease, right? And one other thing I would say is the partners are, even though they're no different than a doctor diagnosing a disease, the partners are also if you ever watched the show House, there are good doctors and bad doctors, right? Bad doctors. And there are very few really good ones. So just because you're the partner you're working for, they're good, I would say good, average, below average, and bad doctors. So typically people that make partner in your firm or get a lot of business are good doctors, at least what the expectation is. And partners with business, which you should seek out to work for, those are the partners you want to work with, are the best doctor because clients are seeking them out and they're getting business because they're telling clients what the client wants to hear, what they want to hear. So that's how that works. So the partners with the most business are the best doctors. They're telling clients what they want to hear and really doing a great job doing that. And those are the people you should do. If they refuse any way of making something that work the way they see it, even if it does a high risk for a client and you present a better alternative, are they incompetent? No, they're not incompetent. If there is a high risk alternative, a reasonable alternative, you just need to do the best you can. And sometimes their egos are such that they can't be wrong. And I'm sure you've met people like that. There's people that are freaking on pins and needles. And if you say something that they think is wrong, then they're going to flip out and get mad at you and whatever. I mean, that's their problem. But you need to be big enough to move beyond that. You just need to do the best you can. And you need to get your ego out of it and really do everything you can to just do the best work you can and do the work in the way that the person wants, not in the way you want. So you need to learn what the person wants. I had one of the most troubling things one of the more troubling things I ever saw was I was working with an attorney that had come from one of the top law firms in the world and had graduated from like a top 3 law school. I'm not going to say which one, but think like Stanford, Yale, Chicago, right? I don't know, like Harvard, but literally like in the top % or something of his class. And very smart guy, also very personable, like a nice guy. And so he was about 6 months in to a job and with one of these firms. And after graduating from law school, and he had a matter where a junior partner asked him just to give him some research, didn't ask for opinions about other things. And so he dug into the file and found a reason that the entire case could stop, that matter could stop, that the firm it was wrong to do it. And then he maybe quoted some malpractice statutes or something. And if that wasn't followed, something just, not right. I don't know if he did a malpractice thing, but I guess he said that he made it very aware. This poor guy, he's a solo practitioner. And as a 6-month attorney, I got him interviews with Boyce Schiller. I got him interviews at Quinn Emanuel. And he actually got an offer, I think, from Quinn Emanuel. But then there was a conflict and they wouldn't do it. And then the other firms brought him in for second interviews and everything. And he was prepped by me very well for interviews. But because he was no longer employed there, they asked for references. And so he gave them references and everything was over at that point. And I got him other interviews and things, but he was so devastated by this, he basically quit the practice of law And not only that, before I talked to him the last time, he said, "Oh, my father committed suicide and I'm worried that I'm going to go down the same track." I'm like, Jesus, dude, you made a little mistake here. You can learn from it. So he quit, and I don't know what he did for several months. And then he opened his own practice, I think doing criminal defense. So this is what happens. You have to be very careful about what you do. And you have to, had this guy just not involved his ego and taken everything in stride, he would have been okay, but he did, and his ego was affected, and I can understand why, and this is what happened. Okay, yeah, so this, you could apply to BCG. I will review your resume, and if you are placeable, which it sounds like you would be, I don't know, doing a non-legal position, you would have to frame your resume in a way that looks like this. You'd also probably have to do a national search, because there are positions like that, but they're not in every state. They would also want you to work, and I'm giving you the consultation right now, and everyone on the calls the consultation, and they would want to work they would want you to have probably worked in a law firm at some point, and also probably they would have a little bit concern if you were too senior. And that's how that works, but not always. And so this is a marketable practice area, but they would want you to be giving some sort of legal advice to get hired by a firm. So I'm happy if you apply on the website to review your resume. We also have something called, if you got this invitation, you're probably registered on BCG, so you can just reapply and I'll review it. I review every single resume that comes into this company, and it takes me 4 or 5 hours a day. I was up till 11:30 last night doing it. And the night before, I was up to 30 doing it. And this is also spending my mornings doing it. And it's just ridiculous how much work it is. But I do it because everyone deserves that. So it's called reverse recruiting, which is not something I promote. I've never talked about it on these calls. I think this is the URL. It's not something that I've emailed anyone about. Maybe I will at some point, but it's available. I don't promote it because I just want it to be there in case someone ever needs it. And that's basically involves doing your resume or helping you send out lists to firms, finding opportunities for you based on the things that we have. So that's what that is about. But I'm not going to promote a service like that on this call because I don't think that's fair to people or takes away from the questions and stuff. But some people want personal stuff. What I would say also that would help you is just to review a lot of articles and other webinars. Unfortunately, it's not because I think I'm such a big deal. It's because I spend my time trying to help thousands of people individually or tens of thousands. And it's better to put my energy in that than to help other people. But I do help individuals, but only what's not cheap. So that's all. Let me see what anything else with this. This is a good question. Thank you for this question. So this person asked, how serious bad is it if I'm a first year associate and have gotten a few negative reviews and criticisms on my work? That's exactly what happens to all first year associates. They may not do it if you're like coming out of a Supreme Court clerkship or went to a top 3 law school or 5 law school as much because they don't want to lose you, but it happens. So here's how reviews work, just so everyone understands. Reviews. So typically what they do is your first and second year, this is almost all law firms. If they're big law firms are good, they give you hell, meaning everything is wrong. They may even tell you that people don't like you. Who knows? And these reviews will be unbelievably harsh. Now, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, this doesn't happen. This happens typically at established firms and not firms with systems that have been built over decades. Okay. And the reason for that is because this is what happens with established businesses, because they They can hire people. They have it's not hard to hire people. They want to protect themselves from lawsuits. If you do something later, they can cite your reviews and all that sort of thing. So that's how that works. And so you have that. Then the next thing you have is then you have attorneys that are sometimes it's new to 1.5 years. But then the other thing they're doing is they're trying to get you to rise to their level, get you to improve and rise to their level. And so what does that mean? What that means is they want you are learning how to practice law. You don't learn it in law school. You're learning how to practice law. And because of that, this is what they do. They want to teach you how to practice law. And in order to do that, they need to review you harshly. They need to be honest. And they can risk offending you because there's tons of people that want to be junior associates in most firms, right? It's just how it is because the market is big and you're not yet specialized and don't know what you're doing. This is a great question. So I love answering this. You do not know what you're doing. You got that going on. Then so your first year, so somewhere between your third and sixth year, you know what you're doing. And this is also, by the way, this is important. This is often dependent on economic climates. Sometimes market is good and they are making money. So they're being careful. And assuming you're getting on the job training. Okay, so you got that. So they're often dependent on economics. And then the final thing, I'm just trying to, newer growing firms typically do not have systems. And do not develop them for some time. So I hope that makes sense. Meaning you're a new business and you're getting all this work, you're growing, and therefore they're not going to put a lot of pressure on you. They're going to they're happy to have people work there. They're busy. They don't have time to start a business. They don't have time to criticize people that they know to relieve. So when you're 36 year, you know what you're doing. So this is important. So when you know what you're doing, you are profitable. Well, they do not need to write off your time or train you too much. And then you are much more valuable to them. And also you are hard to find in the market because there are fewer of you, because fewer people have your expertise or have your expertise or have dropped out, dropped out. Wow. And done other things. So it means you're a proven commodity. What this also means is that you can, at this point, you can get jobs at more prestigious firms. Generally get jobs at more prestigious firms. Well, without too much difficulty, because grades do not matter. and inexperience does. So it's very common for attorneys with crappy grades in law school, who didn't get into the best firm out of law school and felt like they were failures. And then they suddenly are practicing in an Am Law 50 firm after getting trained in a certain practice area. This often, by the way, happens with patent attorneys. So patent attorneys are scientific people. And so what happens with them is they typically will not be able to get a job at a big firm because they are often engineers while they're in law school, or if they aren't engineers in law school, it doesn't click for them in writing and things. And they end up getting jobs in small law firms. And then once they get the experience, everyone jumps up and down to hire them. So same thing with most candidates. Now, what happens now at your 6 to, 6, some law firms it's more, but it could be between your 6 and, 8 to 9. Typically what will happen is often bad reviews will often start again. They'll be vague and they don't always happen depending on the workload and things, but bad reviews will often start again. These firms will do this because they want to see who will stay and is committed. The firms also do this because they don't want to get sued if you leave, if you know my partner. And also politics starts happening. So politics happens. And what politics means is that certain attorneys don't want more partners. Because it affects their income. Also, so it's more important because it affects your income. Also, your billing rate is higher, is close to partner level. And because of this, partners have to share work with you. And it is more difficult, costly, and difficult to work. Primarily, and there's a lot of reasons for this, primarily because partners make more money. I'm sorry about being so thorough with this, but partners make more money when they do work themselves. Instead of giving it to associates. Giving it to others. So what does that mean? To others. So what that means is that these partners will make maybe 50% of the work they do on their own. This is an example of work they do on their own. And 15% of work give to others. So you get the idea to others. And when your billing rate is high, associates, clients would prefer you to do the work, would also prefer you to do the work, also prefer the partner to do the work, and also prefer, and that's basically it. And so would partners. So that's the dynamics. The more senior you get, the harder it is to get work, and the fewer people, and the more people act like it's a favor. This is really important question. That's why I'm spending so much time on this, to give you work. So I hope you can understand that. I think that's pretty simple. This is the dynamic of all law firms. It's why you want to generate business, survival, and self-esteem are essential, only developed in this way. in another law firm. So what happens is, I don't care what law firm you're at, after several years, if you work in one of these firms, that's what's going to happen in most firms. Okay, what level of toxicity should not accept from partners? This is wrong. Sure. No. Sexual, racial, religious, all that kind of stuff. Religious, handicaps, whatever. Now, what I can tell you is you should never look for trouble. Never look for trouble. You should realize that people are human and make mistakes. And the people that win are the ones who avoid this. Now, the problem with all this stuff is that if you file lawsuits and things like that against a firm, everybody will always know about it. They will follow you for the rest of your career. So you can do all this stuff or not. It's up to you. But you need to be careful with stuff. Now, depending on the law firm, if someone does something really wrong to you, then you need to report it if you feel that's important, but you need to do so discreetly. And you need that, I don't know, just maybe say, I don't want to work with this person anymore. And you don't have to worry about me. I'm not going to do anything about this. Because if you're looking for trouble, you're going to find it. You're always going to find it. And you shouldn't. You should be trying to just figure things out. Now, I'm not saying that those other things are completely inappropriate, but keeping your ego in check is really important. And just moving through things is very important as well, because not everyone is going to behave the way you expect them to. Wow, these people keep asking questions. These are good questions. I'm glad you guys are answering them. All right, girls, let's see here. Oh, yeah. So what do people do? So it was very funny. I used to live in this house. I shouldn't say this, but it was not this type of house, but it was next to this house that was probably one of the top 3 largest homes in Malibu. It was also directly on the beach on a cliff, but you could get down to the beach. And it was owned by this guy that had built like the first Hilton in Los Angeles and all this stuff. And not only that, but he owned the largest property in terms of acreage and everything in Beverly Hills that I think was just sold for the record price of something. I think I saw it in the Wall Street Journal. So this guy obviously doing very well. And so I said to him at one point, wow, you're really doing well. And he said, no, I'm just barely getting by, and I tried, had some luck. And so this is how people are that are very successful. Not all of them, not Trump, but they act, they don't have money. They act like they're not successful. They downplay it. They tell people that they feel very fortunate or blessed for their success, and they mean it. I was talking to this real estate agent the other day, or no, not the other day, a couple of weeks ago, and he was there's all these houses in Malibu that have been, and I don't live in a house like this, but there's these houses that have been selling for 60 million, 70 million, 200 million. It's just insane. I can't even imagine. This guy, of course, gets 5% commission when he brings clients to him. And you get 5% commission on a $200 million house. It's $10 million as a commission. And this guy's got no education or anything. He's just a nice guy. And so I asked him, like, how do you do this? And he's, oh, it's just luck. And I feel very blessed to have these opportunities. And this is how the best people behave. People that don't behave are the ones that talk about their schools all the time, talk about their salary, talk about other people getting promoted, not them. That worry. This is the morass you don't want to fall into. You can fall into it, but if you do, that's going to hurt you. I recommend not doing any of this stuff and really steering clear of all that type of stuff as well. So to the extent you can. Okay. Just document everything. That's all. Thing that happened. Then also get firm deadlines from people in advance. Email them, or just thanking them for the work. I mean, this is one option. You don't have to do it for work, and saying have it. Try to avoid them for future work. I mean, there's a lot more I guess I could offer here, but that's, and then I also would, those are kind of, and then try, meaning you can try to do your best to turn down assignments and be busy on other things. And what that means is essentially you do all this because you don't want to, you want to protect yourself. But what I could say is most of the partners that do this are the most insecure, and have the least power in the firm, are often the most incompetent, meaning insecure about their careers. Least in power in the firm, are often the most at risk of losing their jobs. And are blaming you because they are reporting to other partners. This is what's funny. Other partners reporting to other partners who gave them the work, and they are scared. One of the things I've always told you, and people try to work with partners with business. Best stuff rarely happens. Left. The other thing is, this is another one, avoid branch offices where the work comes from the main office, because partners will also blame things on you. So that's how that works. Some questions. Yes. This question is, if I have an interview coming up with a more prestigious firm that wants to poach from a local competitor, or I have in my firm, I have not been there that long, but this is a great opportunity. Better work, or more work, bigger clients, good stuff. We've heard about the firm. Always wanted to work there. So those things will all help you quite a bit. Is it a bad sign when first or second year hours are written off? No, not a bad sign. It happens with all junior associates. And by the way, junior associates are used. You'll see it's time written off because they do not yet know what they are doing and getting on the job training. So the way that works is junior associate, they could write off 30+% of your time. Mid-level, closer to 0, because you know what you're doing. And then senior, some time written off because you're more expensive. Clients, like junior associates, because it gives the impression to clients that the partner trying to save their money. Save money due to lower billing rates. So that's how that works, if that helps. Okay, so that, I think this is definitely not all the questions. I think this webinar maxed out at one point, and we weren't able to people, not everyone is still here. So I think what I'm going to do is, there's still a lot of people on this thing, but I do have another call at 2, so with my time. So I think it's 1:45 and I just need to take care of a few phone calls. So I think what I'm going to do, this has been going almost 4 hours, and I think these are great questions. If you did ask questions, what I'm going to do is I will answer them next week. I think these are awesome questions. I may, I could do this, but I'm not really sure. I may do a webinar for you about how to find a position doing all these different types of searches and stuff, and how we do it and how you can do it. I may do something like that. It is not an informational, it's an informational, not necessarily an inspiring type topic, but I think it would be good for everyone to hear. So I'll think about that. But in addition, I certainly appreciate all these people that are still in this webinar. I think this is really good information for you. I think that everyone is asking a lot of very good questions, and there's still a lot of really good questions. So I will definitely answer them next week. But I definitely appreciate everyone spending the time doing this. Learning this kind of information is extremely helpful because no one knows this. And these are all things that can drastically help your career. And it's just so smart being on this. So thank you very much. And I will come back next week and at the same time, and I will also do the questions that we missed today, because there's a lot of them in the webinar. So thank you very much. And I will be back next week. Thanks.